I noticed that some of you did the practice exam for the quarter term. If you haven't yet, go ahead and work on that for tomorrow. And then tomorrow, bring your questions. We'll go through the questions you have from that because this is where it really counts. This is where we're applying the knowledge to the content and knowledge to the test taking ability. Sorry. And it's an adjustment. I'm going to go through several of them with you, kind of help you learn how to analyze a question, how to maybe weed some stuff out, and hopefully that will make a difference, help you move into the next phase of this thing, which is applying it to the test. Okay. We have covered 7. Chapter 7, finished that one up. We've covered the math in 8, where it comes when we're talking about calculating commission. That seems to be the one that's easiest to pick up because it's the money and we care about it a lot. So we can touch on that again, but any questions you have along the way, obviously let me know and we can revisit. I could even do one-on-one. I could do an explainer video or an audio or type something out if I need to. So just use me as a resource. I don't mind. I'm happy to help. So feel free to text, email, put it in Notion, whatever you need to do to let me know where you stand and what challenges you might be facing. What we have left to do is chapter 8, and then we're going to go straight over to 10. We went into 9, which is basic contract law. 10 will be applying it to North Carolina and to the way we do things here. Because it's state by state. It's different in other states. Not every state has that thing I mentioned called due diligence money, due diligence fee. That's a state by state thing. We didn't used to have it until 12 or 13 years ago. I was on a listing appointment today, and I got here just now from that, and he has sold several houses, and I said, when was the last time? And he said about 13 years ago, and I thought, aha. That means he has no knowledge, no experience of the due diligence fee concept. So I had to make sure to explain how that worked to prepare him for when we get offers so he'll understand what he's looking at. Now is a better time to explain it than in the moment, right? So much of the problems, this is all free, by the way. This part is free, has nothing to do with the exam. It's just real world. It's much better to give them advance warning. So when the bad news does come up, if it comes up, they at least feel like, oh, she's in control. He's in control. He knew this could happen. He warned me about this. That carries you so much further than everything just to land on your shoulders and their shoulders in the heat of the moment. When a transaction, as we're going through and some horrible thing pops up that threatens to derail the whole thing. So I like to give the advance notice as much as I can. We flipped ahead to the math just to kind of break up the night because it was the last hour and I could tell that we needed something different. So not genius level on my part. It's just natural. The last hour gets a little challenging. And it was this. We talked about commission splits. We went through the tree. I call it the tree because it could be that the test question asks you not to figure out what the broker is getting here, but what the commission was or what the sale price was at the end. They give you the broker's piece that they made. They tell you what the percentage splits are, and you've got to kind of basically work backwards and back your way into what the sale price in it was actually was. And that's just going back and forth. So if you know it well enough, you should be able to do that. And we touched on that. We talked about applying this to a T formula. Basically, the amount of commission you're making in dollars is the product or multiplication between the sales price and the commission rate. Don't forget, in these T formulas, there's always a rate on the bottom. It's a rate times a big number to get a smaller number on top, right? If ever you're trying to remember a T formula and you're not sure if you have them all in the right spot, from memory, you can just think, do I have a rate down here? Okay, I need to have a rate, and I need to have a really big number, and that rate times the big number equals a smaller number. It seems silly, but it might just help you get this in the right order so that you can get another couple of points on the test. They all count the same. They're all over a point. As the hardest of the hardest math question is the same as sort of what is designated dual agency, right? So you never know. You never know which one could make or break you. We also saw the commission split math between you and your firm, and we got into some actual problems. So it's just a matter of understanding percentages, how to use the percent sign in the calculator, really. So we've already used the percent sign when it came to property taxes. And that was when it's $1 per 100. We just hit the $1.40 and the percent sign to figure out the decimal version. And this is just similar to that, right? It's using the percent key, being able to convert from the decimal back and forth to the percent. And it's really just moving the decimal over in the right number of spots in the right direction. So if you've forgotten that, don't forget that there's an addendum. Yeah, an addendum, not an amendment. An addendum to the yellow book in the back of the book. There are, it's not addendum, it's appendix. There's appendices in the back of the yellow book about some math. Now that we've touched on a lot of math, maybe revisit that or see it for the first time, and it will kind of bring you up to speed on some of that math between fractions and decimals and percentages. So remember the resource. We also saw this kind of problem, and it presented sort of I call it working backwards. We're going backwards to figure out, using our net price that we want to get and the expenses that are going to cost, how do we back into what it needs to sell for to get that price? So let me do a quick small version of that and see if you remember. I'm going to throw a little bit of a extra element in here too. So we know that the seller wants to net, when it's all said and done, in order to go buy the thing they want to go buy, they want to net $213,000 after paying your exorbitant, ridiculous, overpriced fee and all the other random costs regarding selling. So 213 is the net. They have a loan. The loan payoff for their existing loan that they need to use the proceeds to pay off. They only owe $310,000 on this. They have a second mortgage too, by the way. Real world experience, real world life scenario. Sometimes people get home equity lines of credit, basically a second mortgage. So there's a second payoff. Test question might throw that in there. And this one is for $63,000. $63,000. Also, in your expert opinion, as a ballpark figure, because we don't know until we talk to a handy person, repair company kind of thing, we can tell that repairs are needed to the tune of, let's say, $18,000. $18,000 in repairs are needed. Maybe it's the heating and air system needs a new condenser. Maybe it needs a new heat exchanger, a whole new unit, maybe a whole new system. Somehow that's the deal. There's also some miscellaneous things. Maybe they want to put a warranty on there, or you think they should put a home warranty on the property, which covers the seller while it's on the market, and the buyer for a whole year after. Warranties are good because if the house is in older condition, worse condition, the warranty might help the buyer feel better about going ahead and buying it because they know certain things are covered. So between the warranty and, let's just say, miscellaneous other things, also the deed preparation, which is probably about $400 or $500 plus the warranty, let's just call it $1,500. Two things I'm just cramming in there together: deed prep plus warranty, $1,500. What we also know is that we are worth it, and so we are charging a commission of 7%. Let me line it up with the numbers. 7% commission. We need to have enough in this mix to give us our money, because What are they going to do without us? They can't do this without us, right? Here's another thing to know. The market value of homes like this one, based on your preliminary research, is, let me think for a second. Market value is $750,000. Homes like this one probably worth about that much. Question is, number one, how much does it need to sell for? Here's another thing we know. The amount that you're asking, the list price is what I call the wish price. It's what we're hoping to get. Are we sure that we're going to get it? In some markets, you are expected, you look at the research, and the sales price to list price ratio is maybe 95%, meaning if you're asking at 100,000, you might get 95 for it. And that's more of a neutral market phenomenon. In a market like we're in now, we're around that 98 to probably 105%. Yes, getting more than asking price because of competing offers, right? But let's say for the sake of this problem, just in your research, you know these two things. The market value is 750 and sales to list price ratio is 95. In other words, whatever it sells for is going to be probably 95% of what it should be asking, what the list price should be. So how much to sell for? That's one question. And then the second question, how much to list it at? How much to put it on the market for? Start by doing what you've already done, what we already did last week, and then I'll show you how to fold in these new elements to this thing. So start and tell me what it needs to sell for in order to accomplish these goals. What do we need to sell it for to make that happen? Go ahead and take some time and do that. Figuring, again, how much would it need to sell for to get the seller that net, pay those expenses, including the expense of us and our 7% commission. What do we start with? We add up everything we can, all the dollars we can. Then we're left with that pesky percent amount that doesn't have a handy dollar amount. So let's add up all of these dollars. And let's see, this came from my mind, so let me do it now. 213 plus 310 plus 1,000 plus 18,000 plus 1,500. And all that I get 6,055. Same? Is that what you got? Good. Doorbell rang. That's somebody in. There we go. 6055. Next step, what are we charging? 7%. Highway robbery. What are you crazy? Can't you find somebody cheaper? I'm kidding. So 100% of the total sale price that you're going to get, no matter what, you're definitely always going to get 100% of the sale price, meaning the seller and you combined, right? Sale price is always 100% minus your piece of 7 means the seller's part is 93. So the seller and the split between you and the seller, or your firm and the seller, is a 93-7. 93 to the seller, 7% to us. And so now that we know that little piece and the net in dollars, 6055 is 93% of what? Replace the is with a division symbol and do the math. 6055 divided by 93% means that we need to sell for $651.75. Is that what you got? Did I miss something? Let me double check. 213 plus 310 plus 63. Real world. This is also real world, guys, because in the test you might need to go back through and check your math. Yep, 6055 divided by the 93%. 651.075. Now, do we have enough at 651.075 to pay you your 7 and accomplish all those other goals? Yeah, we just did it. Here's the next question in the real world. If the market value is $750 and we're right about that, and we only need to sell it for $651 to accomplish the seller's goals, do we have good news to share with the seller? Or is this bad news for the seller? This means that now we can charge them 27% commission instead of, I'm just kidding. But yeah, this is a good place to be. We say, look, seller, great. We have $100,000 of leeway, of cushion. You just need 651 to walk away with what you need to walk away with, prefer to walk away with. What if instead of that, instead of the market value being 750, let me rewrite that one. What if the market value is actually 650 or 640 or 630? Now there's not much cushion. Now we have another discussion to have with them. Hey, seller, you're going to need 651 to accomplish your goals, but we'll be lucky to get 650 out of it based on what I'm seeing other similar properties sell for. One next question to ask them is, how bad do you really need the 213? It might just be that they say, well, that's my lucky number. I could also take 113. Okay, good. Because we might not be able to quite get you the 213. That's just real world, guys, right? Comparing the net with the price needed to get that net, and then comparing it to the market value that we expect to really get for the property. What about this next piece? You might see this pop up. Now we know how much we need to sell it for. $651 and some change. What was it? $651. Yeah, we'll call it that. Somewhere around there. In our further research, we discovered that the sales to list price ratio of houses like this in this area, 95%. In other words, 651.075. Excuse me, if that's the sale price that we expect or that we need to sell for and that we've also verified is probably the likely market value, 651.075, watch this, is 95% of what? I'm doing it again to get from the sale price up to the supposed list price based on this one statistic. So what's 651 and 75? I'm just going to leave it in the calculator. Divided by 95%. Well, that means if we were to list it at 685, let's just call it 340. then based on this 95% sales to list price ratio that we've seen be the trend in the market for these kinds of houses, listing it at 685 should get us about 651. It's just a thing. It's just one more element to look at. What I would rather do is claw my eyes out instead of price a house at 685, 340. That's a stupid listing price. That is really dumb. Any ideas why that's a dumb price to list it for, to ask a wish price? Hey, this is on the market. What do you think? As those of you who have spent time on Zillow, Realtor, Homes.com, Trulia, anything where you've ever looked for houses, when you
People like whole numbers that are easy to calculate with and things like that.
Have you ever put in $9.99 on a search? No one ever does. Why would you? It's good for selling shoes and cars. Something psychological about seeing that big fat number should be a 5 instead of a 6, for instance. But when it comes to houses, you're not fooling anybody that a $599, $999 house is basically the same thing as a $600,000 house. But what you're giving up is all those people ahead in the next price bracket from seeing the house. So 685, 340, that's a tough one. I would be inclined to give it one of two pieces of advice to this seller. I would look further. I would see what, first of all, let me see. I don't know if I've got this. Okay, no. You could do research in various places, and it will tell you how many showings are happening in certain price brackets. So how many showings are we seeing in the 650 to 700 range, or the 700 to 750 range? And based on that, maybe a lot more showings are happening in the 650 to 675 range. Maybe 20% of the showings in a given month are happening here. And then in the 675 to 700 range, maybe 40% of showings are happening out of that given month. And so while you're pricing it a little higher, right, pricing it at 700 instead of 685, 15,000 more, it's going to make it so that people that do a search from, let's just say, 650 up to 700, those people are going to see it. And then the people that start their search at 700 and go up to 750, eyeballs are doubled, right? But if you stayed down here around the 685 mark, it's only going to be the people that stop their search at likely 690, 700. Right? So that is an element that comes into play here. For your purposes for this test, you might need to know how to do this sales to list price ratio thing and basically just do that backwards math one more step. You did it the first time to go from the net and expenses number to get up to the likely sale, the needed sale price. You're doing it again to get from the sale price to the list price based on this sales to list price ratio number that they might share with you in the problem. All that other stuff is just remember it for when you get out in the real world. But that's the justification for it. Big question is, what should we ask in order to get the number we want to get? Well, those are some issues that come up. I would rather price this either at 675 or at 700, frankly. But I think the test question will be a little more actual real numbers. And so that 685 would be what you're looking for based on that sales to list number. Let me see here. Where do we go? Okay. What else? Okay, that was all I wanted to share with you there. So we talked about that net math. Now let's go to the front of the chapter. Okay. Going to scroll and scroll and scroll. And the level 1 in Unit 8, I think I talked about this already, are things called, well, the Realtor Code of Ethics says that we can't steal other people's clients. It's called tortious solicitation of contractual relations. Don't be a jerk. You get a neighbor. You have a neighbor, and they know you got your license last week. You told them at the barbecue on the cul-de-sac. But then today, you see a sign pop up in their yard for sale of a different company that's not you, the one you work for. And you're mad. That's your friend. And so you can't help yourself. You knock on the door and you say, you probably forgot, but I mean, I'm in the business. You should hire me. Fire them right now and hire me, or some version of that. Not allowed, right? No surprise, probably. That is interfering. That is solicitation. There are people who do a version of that. There was a reality show, of all things, where the wife was in real estate and she got out because they were bazillionaires, and she was going to do it some more of it. She was bored. And so her daughter, her college-age daughter, decided to buy a condo without her. List her condo in order to buy another thing. Listed a thing with another agent, probably because she's tired of listening to her mom's advice. And the mom literally on camera on this show told her, well, you need to get your priorities straight and go fire that agent and then hire your mother. And I'm like, on national available multi-million viewer TV reality show, you've just violated and this isn't even a state of North Carolina thing. This is a realtor code of ethics thing. She basically told her daughter to do this thing we're not supposed to do. I always wondered if by the way, I don't know if she got in trouble for that, but it became a non-issue because both she and her husband went to prison. So that was a couple months later. Unrelated situation. So we're going to talk about that sort of thing, as well as employment contracts, the MLS, antitrust laws, the thing that our current lawsuit and settlement is sort of hovering around, how the reason all those headlines that you've been reading are wrong. They got it wrong, and they say things like 6% standard commission is gone. Wrong. Number one, it was never standard. That's what the antitrust laws are about, and we'll get into that. There's also a thing about monopolies. You can't agree with other firms, maybe other big firms. Hey, you take the northeast part of town, I'll take the southeast part of town, and we'll stay out of each other's territory. Because now you're taking choices away from the consumer. So it's that stuff too. And some listing and buyer agency practices. So first of all, some of this is going to be recap. A lot of the 7 and 8 agency stuff, chapter 7 and 8 overlaps, and we went into it already. So consider some of this review if it sounds familiar. Here's what an agency agreement has to have in it. First of all, tell me in the chat, what are some examples of agency agreements? What do I mean? What are we accomplishing with some of the agency agreements? Who are we representing? Let me start there. I've given you 5 questions in a row. What are some agency agreement client roles? Yeah, there we go. Thank you, William. The seller's agency agreement, also known as the listing agreement, when we're being hired by a seller to sell their property for them, list it and sell it. What's another one? Predicting. I know the answer. Because when we think of sellers, that's a good one. Alfred came in from the side and snuck up on me like a cheetah on a safari video. Property managers, you went straight to the property management side, which a lot of people don't think of as an agency agreement, but it is. Absolutely is. You're being hired to do real estate, manage property for someone else for compensation. What's one that's related to sellers? What's the other end of that situation? If we have seller's agency or listing agency, we also have, you guys shy tonight. There it is. Perfect. Buyer agency. Working with buyers. And then finally, what's related to property management? Property management is when a broker represents a seller, but there's also a case where a broker could represent the renter. Yeah, William says tenant representation. Exactly right. Perfect wording. So no matter what the agency that we're talking about, any of those, auctions, that involves agency as well. All of them have to be signed by the parties. Who are the parties in a buyer agency agreement? Who are the parties involved that need to sign a buyer agency agreement? You got it. You're like, that's stupid. That's a simple answer. Why are you asking us that? The buyer and the firm, let's make it more specific. The firm is the agent helping that buyer, but the one who is actually holding their hand, putting them in their car, showing them property, writing the offer with them is you, the sub-agent to the agent. You are the one actually signing that buyer agency agreement. So all parties, and for listing agreement, it's the seller and the agent, between the seller and the firm, and signed by the agent on behalf of that firm, right? When you look at your agency agreements that I put in the Google Drive, the buyer agency one and the listing one, you'll see on the first page, it says this is between, let me pull that real quick. This is between the client and the firm. It's going to be around here somewhere. Oh, we'll go with this one. It's the seller one. So here is an exclusive right to sell listing agreement. Right there at the top. And it says this, it's entered into between who? Between fill in the blank as the seller and fill in the blank, not your name, but the firm's name. Your human name doesn't go here. Your firm's name does. But then on the back page where everybody signs stuff, we've got the place for the seller to sign. Maybe if there's another seller, if there's like a third or fourth seller, we're going to have an addendum attachment to have all the other names and signatures. If it's an entity, an LLC kind of a thing. But then down here, the firm that's involved, that owns this agreement, basically, and then it's signed. The signature, the only signature on behalf of the firm is yours, the individual agent's signature. There's no place, not even for the BIC. I would have guessed, if I didn't know better, that a broker in charge had to sign this thing too, but they don't. It's you on behalf of your firm because you're a general agent for your firm, right? You're that level. You can sign on its behalf. Your firm doesn't want, your BIC, trust me, doesn't want you to drop every one of these by their office for a signature before you go out and sell it and make some money. And that's just the way it is. There's other things in here that we'll go into a little bit later, but let's keep on this track. So all parties, all relevant parties must sign this thing. The broker's license number has to be on the agency agreement. The thing you're doing all this, going to all this trouble to get. Once you pass this class exam, then take the Pearson exam and then pass it and have the background check, and they said, okay, you're ready. Here's your inactive provisional broker's license and the number, your license number. There's also, and I'll just go through these and then I'll show them to you on the listing agreement we just looked at. License number as well as the termination date. All agency agreements have to terminate. They've got to have a built-in expiration. Can't just have them out there forever. Last week, the newest version of the bulletin, the Real Estate Commission bulletin that comes out with the disciplinary action came out. And so there were 1 million disciplinary actions. One of them was a company that was requiring their sellers to list the property, or no, let me say it this way. They were getting sellers to sign a listing agreement for 40 years. 40 years, not even just a standard mortgage duration of 30 years, but a 40-year listing agreement, unheard of. And they also had language built in there that if the seller ever wanted to refinance instead of sell, that this firm had to approve it. That's a bit of an overstep, and the Real Estate Commission apparently didn't like what they read, didn't like how it all shook out, and that person, I forgot what happened to them, but they definitely got disciplined of some sort. So there has to be a termination date, and usually that termination date, I'd say I've written them for a year, but a lot of times 1, 2, 3 months, maybe 6 months, but some kind of termination. It can't just be forever. And then it's got to have non-discrimination provisions, fair housing language. Hey, seller, we're not going to treat people different because of the protected classes they may be in. It's illegal, right? Not only is it a jerk move, but it's illegal. And if we get caught, if we get busted, the fines of normal behavior, this is treble the fines. So we saw some of that, I think, in the first couple of weeks. Let's go find these things. We need to found the signature. We need to find the broker license number, the termination date, and the non-discrimination provisions. In fact, let me do it this way. There we go. If I put that in the chat, can all of you download it? Pretty easy. Click on the link, pull it up, whatever your PDF reader device is on your phone or on your computer. Anybody not able to do that? Let me know. Everybody done that successfully? So you have access to it. You can scroll through it and look around on it. Look around at it. Now, what we need to know is, again, signatures. I'm putting this in the chat. Broker license number, termination date, and non-discrimination provisions. Jot that down somewhere or screenshot it, get it with your phone, because I'm going to put you in breakout rooms and have you team up and go find this stuff yourself, because that will help it sink in a little better. And it keeps things from being sort of maybe dry. Hopefully that'll be a little more interesting. And while we're at it, good. Going to do the same thing with the buyer agency agreement. So I'm putting that in the chat too. Open that one up too. Find it and just identify basically the page in those two places where this stuff shows up, and maybe top, middle, bottom. Top portion, top third, middle third, bottom third, just as a point of reference. Doesn't have to be super fancy. So here we go. Perfect. Is everybody here? Everybody paying attention? Okay, good. I see you. You ready? Let's make sure we're on camera, please. For the Zoom. So I'm gonna open up this. You can go to the breakout room. You can find those things. Make a little note of where you found them, and I'll bring you back in a few minutes. Hey there, did you get disconnected?
My mic wasn't working, so I
Oh,
had to
okay.
go to my settings and it kicked me out.
Okay, I gotcha. I'll shoot you over there.
Okay.
Hey guys. Hey guys, maybe you can hear me. This is your favorite instructor of this class because I'm the only one. But go ahead and come on back in, leave your breakout room if you are done. And then we'll go see where we found these things. Okay. We'll wait for the rest of them to come on back in. Then we'll take a look. I think we need 2 more. There we go. So what about the buyer agency agreement? Where did we find, we know the signatures, but where did you find the broker license number?
Last page.
On the last page.
There you go. Notice you're tested, the slides and the syllabus tests you that the broker, meaning yours, you're the broker working for your firm, yours is what needs to be on here, but there's also a place for the firm one. But the test is going to be that your broker one needs to be on there. So just, they're both on this one, but they're talking about your broker one particularly. What about the termination date? Where did you find that?
It's also
It's
on
on
the
top.
first page.
All right. Sorry.
Where at?
I found it on the first page.
Halfway down?
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah. It's going to run from this beginning date to terminate on this one, whichever occurs sooner between the, when a buyer either buys property or hits this date. In other words, we could run this thing 3 months, but maybe they buy something in 1 month. Well, whenever they buy the thing, even though we've got 2 more months left on this agreement, this just said that the earlier one terminates it, right? Because it's for the purpose of buying that property. Now, what if you want to work with an investor and they want to keep you on as their go-to agent? Well, you could, you're going to need to have one of these for every transaction. You need to have it in the file. Another one says there you go, for buyers who purchase more than one property, then this agreement terminates on this date. So for the investor, you'll check the second box and have a later one, whatever date you need to. Notice none of that says time is of the essence. You can extend it if the parties want to extend it, if they are cool with it and you want to just keep bumping, that works. What about the fair housing language, non-discrimination language? Where'd you find that?
On the exclusive right to sell, it's on page 5.
Okay. What about on the buyer one? Anybody have the buyer one? Bottom. Somebody said what? And I probably should have been more specific because we haven't exactly looked at it. But I'm talking about this in bold. It's always all caps, always all bold. And the language is the same across all of the agency agreements. It looks exactly the same. And it just says the agent/firm shall conduct all brokerage activity without respect to the protected classes. Yeah. Race, color, religion, sex, national origin, handicap, familial status of anybody, party or prospective party. They also, because remember, this was written by the Realtor Association, North Carolina Realtors, and the North Carolina Bar. They say further, if you're a realtor, you have an ethical duty as part of your code of ethics to conduct such activity without respect also to sexual orientation or gender identity. When we are dealing with the federal fair housing categories that we first went through, the one of sex, which originally was put in there to basically mean don't discriminate against men or women, that has developed, right? We've got other things going on these days. So they say just to consider these, the identities, the sexual orientation to be a part of this. Those to be fit into that sex category of the federal version. But this specifically says if you're a realtor member, pay attention to that part too. What else? I think that was all we asked you for, and it's perfect timing. So let's go ahead and take our break, and I'll see you back here in 10 minutes.
ready for this?
Hey yo, who mans is this?
Y'all ready for this?
Mom? Dad? Is it gone?
Jesse, it's really not a good time.
Jesse, the house has been sold. The new owners are expected at any moment. Where do you think you're going?
Inside. Bought the place. Mom? Dad? Is it gone?
I gotta tell you something. I have this ladder. It is awesome.
And
Everybody wants this ladder. I live in an apartment with vaulted ceilings. Uh-oh. I gotta tell you something. I have this ladder. It is awesome. And everybody wants.
Welcome back. There we go. Okay. We also wanted to do the same thing for the listing agreement. Let's go over there and take a look at the listing agreement. Here it is. Where do we find the signature? I'll bet you got to that one really fast. Actually, we did this one first, so you probably saw the signature on the back page of both. I won't insult your intelligence with that. Oh, and look, and that's where the firm license number and the individual license number shows up too. What about the termination date? Somebody earlier said that. Termination date on the listing agreement. Oh, look, front page. And then, well, since we're talking about it, let's just look at it a little further. Number one, there's a couple of choices of the boxes you could check here. The effective date and then the expiration. There we go. The expiration, this agreement terminates on 11/59 on this date. Put in the expiration date. There we go. And then the fair housing language, somebody I think said page 5 on this one. And there we go. Top of the page, exact same verbiage. Same, just cut and pasted. It shows up on the property management agreement and the tenant representation agreement, right? And that's it. Well done. So all agency agreements must have these 4 provisions. You don't need to ever know that Rule 104 says this. You just need to know what the rule says, and that's this part. The bare minimum agency agreement requirements. There it is again, the signature, the license number, the termination or expiration, and the language. By the way, if you noticed on the bottoms of the pages, there's this logo being circled in red. That's the Equal Opportunity Housing logo, and it shows up because if you were to get investigated for a fair housing type of violation and come to find out you're never putting this symbol anywhere in your information, not the website, not your cards or signs, it's going to be worse for you. It's going to maybe make them feel like, well, does he even prioritize this very important piece of disclosure in the business? So it's a really important logo. I have it on my signs and my cards and website and all that good stuff. What is it about a listing agreement, though? Why do we have them? What's the point of a listing agreement? Who does it benefit? Listing agreement benefits who?
The seller.
In what way?
It ensures Carol D or old car.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the one way to think of it. Sure. Is it possible that the listing agreement is also something that we're happy with? Is it one of those cases also where I'm darn sure there is one, and I'm also glad that I'm glad there is one, and I'm glad the Real Estate Commission won't let us do any listing activity until it's signed, because ultimately we care about this the most. I'll bet if a seller had the choice and they could say, look, Neil, you seem great and all, but I'm not signing anything. Can't you just go out there and put your sign up and do your little dance and go bring me a buyer? They would love it if we could do that for them without it being in writing. Because then tomorrow they could wake up and change their mind, and there's nothing holding them to any sort of an agreement. So really, when it comes to a listing agreement, it's mostly an employment contract to get us paid. And I'm just thankful for them, because it kind of helps hold their feet to the fire a little bit, helps them understand the concept of loyalty. So thankful for it, right? Property owner hires the firm to market and procure buyers. Yes, it accomplishes other goals. It also says what the outline of the duties and responsibilities are, so you're not wrong. But definitely it's one of those things that benefits us. Most of the things the Real Estate Commission does is all about the consumer. And this is too, because by benefiting us and making us feel that we're protected, it lets us work for that consumer and do all those various things that we're responsible for, all that old car stuff. Here it is in the Realtor Code of Ethics, Article 16, which you don't need to know the number, but it's tortious interference with contractual relations. It says any sort of solicitation, whether by phone or otherwise, you can't try to steal other people's clients. Don't do it. Could be on the phone, could be text, could be email. Some people make cold calls to generate business. You can't call currently listed property owners. That is a huge violation, because you could lose your realtor membership. And a lot of times, at least for now, at least until August, not sure what's going to happen then, but when the settlement kicks in. But it might be that it has been up till now the case, at least in this market, that if you weren't a realtor, you couldn't have MLS access. With your realtor membership came the privilege of joining the MLS. How many agents want to give up their MLS access? Not many so far. It might evolve into that once we get another type of MLS, maybe if something like that pops up, but that'd be a death sentence. So we've got to stay on the good side of the realtor board. The Realtor Code of Ethics has to be closely adhered to. Every 3 years, by the way, we are required to take a new ethics course just to be up to speed on any new revelations, new pieces of it, and just as a reminder. So it's a requirement to belong to the National Association of Realtors that you have ethics training every 3 years. Here is another thing we could find trouble with. Those agents who make cold calls to generate business are required to follow the do not call registry rules. Do not call. Anybody on the do not call registry? You have your name on there because you don't want people soliciting business from you, calling you randomly. You get that a lot. I still do. And I get voicemails. They're bold. They leave voicemails. Sometimes they text now too. But here's what we need to know for making cold calls or making any sort of calls as brokers. These rules apply to more than just real estate brokers, but you can call people on the do not call registry under these following conditions. When can you call people whose name shows up on the do not call list? If you've done business with them and you're calling within 18 months. Within 18 months of doing business with them. Having a closing, in other words. Now, that's the do not call rules for calling somebody that you don't really know that well. I would dare say, in the course of helping somebody, you get to know them pretty darn well, almost and maybe including to the point of friendship. Do you think they're going to be mad at you for calling on month 19 after the closing? In real world, probably not. But you're going to be tested on the do not call rules, so don't worry about that. Don't worry about the friendship level of things. You need to know these rules, and these rules say if they're on the do not call list, you can't call them after the 18th month from the last purchase that you had with them. Here's another one. They may not have bought something with you. Maybe instead of buying something with you, they came to your website and clicked around and looked at some things. Maybe they put their contact info in a landing page or something. You can call somebody on the do not call list for 3 months after they make an inquiry. It might be a website visitor. It might be calling you, texting you, emailing you, but they've inquired to you. Now you have a 3-month permission window to keep in touch with them, even if they're on the registry. Here's another one that's not on this slide. You've got to, if you're going to call, you've got to have a list of the do not call registry. You got to have one, some version. There's places you can get it. You can buy it. You can get it from various places. And so you're required. What if you called somebody on the do not call list, or you called somebody that wasn't on the list that you have, and then when you call them, they're like, "Hey, I'm on the list. Why are you calling me?" Come to find out, the list you're using is 6 months old or a year old. You never updated the list. People are added and subtracted from that list all the time. We have a responsibility to not use an old list. If you're going to use this and do this stuff, you've got to make sure your list is no older than 30 days. 30 days or younger list to make sure it's the latest and greatest. You're not imposing upon people that added themselves to that list. So 18 months of last purchase, you can call people on the list. 3 months after the last consumer inquiry, you can call people on the list. Make sure your list is as fresh as 30 days or better. And then you can't call to solicit listings for sale by owners who are on the do not call list either. If it's a for sale by owner and you're calling them to try to talk them into listing with you, they're on that do not call list, not allowed. What if you're calling them because you legitimately have a buyer who wants to maybe buy their house? Is that allowed even if they're on the do not call list? What do you think? For sale by owner seller is on the do not call list, but you have a buyer who wants to maybe look at it, buy it. Can you call them?
No.
You know, sometimes I put these emphases on things to lead you down a path. And in this case, that was one of those times. You are allowed to call them if it's because you legitimately have a buyer that might want to buy the house. That's the whole point, the whole reason that they're a for sale by owner. They're trying to find buyers. And a lot of times on the sign or in their advertisement on Zillow or something, they will say, brokers welcome. What does that mean? Or brokers protected. And that means that they welcome you as a buyer broker, buyer agent, to bring your buyer to look at their property and try to sell it to them. Because why? Protected means they'll pay you a fee. Or they might say buyer agent fee, 4%, 3%, 2%. So can't call if they're on the do not call list and you're just trying to get the listing. But you can call if they're on the do not call list if you legitimately have a buyer. Do you see the difference? That's a big difference. And then, of course, the last one has to do with the tortious interference thing. You can't ever call listings of other firms that are actively the listing. But the moment it expires, it's fair game. And I made the mistake one time. My client, I listed their property. They wanted to buy like a 10-acre parcel to share with their adult son and his wife. the house, we got theirs under contract. They were under contract to buy the next one. And then we had a buyer for their house and a buyer for that buyer's house. It was a domino effect. And the very first buyer in the chain fell apart, decided not to buy, which led to my people not being able to sell to the existing buyer. I told them, look, we could probably get it on the market real quick and have a replacement buyer within a couple of days, but they were really just tired of it, and they were second guessing the one they were going to buy. And so I let him out of the listing agreement without any sort of grief. And they came back to me a year later. But what was my point? Oh my goodness. Totally blanked. It'd been a long day. I'll think of it in about 10 seconds. Almost had it. It flickered across my memory. Maybe I'll think of it. Maybe I won't. Sorry about that, guys. So listings of other firms. Oh, that's where it was. I knew it. I left it alone. I let them out of the listing agreement. We canceled the sale, canceled all that, but I forgot to. I just left it in the MLS as temporarily off the market. That's one of the statuses in the MLS. There's active, there's sold, there's coming soon, there's expired, there's withdrawn, there's temporarily off the market. I set it to temporarily off the market in the middle of the craziness, but I forgot to go back and completely officially withdraw it. And so when couple months later, the listing term expired, they were just blasted all day long with agents calling. Hey, we saw that you failed to sell your house. Do you want to call and talk to me about listing? And I felt terrible. He said, oh my gosh, man, everybody was calling us because I guess it showed up as expired. And I realized, oh no, I did that to you. I'm so sorry. So fair game. Expired listings are a valid way to get business. So are for sale by owners, but you got to do it right. Can't do it in a way that violates these provisions on the slide. So this is about the do not call list. What does this apply to? People on this list within these parameters are people that you can't call. Is there anything else you can't do to reach them? Could you knock on their door because you're standing there in real life? Think that's okay? Or is that also off the table because of the do not call list? What are your thoughts? You're gun shy now because I was mean and tricky. There is no...
I was thinking about that a second ago because I was considering if you could maybe mail out something.
You absolutely can.
But
exactly right. Good thoughts. Very entrepreneurial minded of you. Well, if he says I can't call, then what can I do? A problem solver, right? And so basically all of it is available and allowed except calling. So even if they're on the do not call list, you can go knock on their door. There's a little caveat there. What if they have a don't solicit sign? Well, then that's up to you. Maybe be respectful and don't bother them. But some people are so aggressively go-getters, they ignore that sign. But we're in the South, guys. People have equipment in their home leaned up against the corner beside the door. So be careful whose door you knock on. If it says don't solicit, you might want to take them up on that and not solicit. You're allowed to knock. You're allowed to mail. You're allowed to email. And it's not on here because it's the most popular one. You're allowed to fax. You can send faxes to people. I'm just kidding. You are allowed to fax, but it's not popular. The Postal Service, though. Think about who runs the U.S. Postal Service. Oh, you just told us. The U.S. And think about who created the Do Not Call Registry. The U.S. And so what are you telling me, Neil, that the government says don't call these people on this list, but the government also says, please feel free to mail with no penalties. In other words, pay us money and we'll mail this thing for you. Yeah, you better believe it. That's how that works. There is no do not mail list. They would love for you to spend $1,000 a month mailing postcards to people. By the way, that's another valid and real world way that some agents get business. they would do what's called farm a neighborhood. They pick a neighborhood they like because of the price point, maybe the closeness to them. Maybe they live in it. Maybe they want to live in it. They want to break into it and become that agent who works that neighborhood. Like Highland Creek in my area is about 4,000 homes, and a lot of agents have tried over the years to send lots of postcards and call around and drive around and knock on doors and become the go-to, this is the agent that works this neighborhood. And I can think of 2 names off the top of my head that got to that level, that did so much marketing to that one neighborhood, they became known as the Highland Creek person. 2 different agents, 2 different companies. So yeah, they're happy for you to spend that money. Here's what I'll tell you in real world. If you're going to do a mail campaign and all you can afford is 1 month or 2 months or even 6 months, don't waste your money or your time. This kind of thing, mailers on a regular basis to become known as the, let me call her, she sends stuff out to us all the time. It's not going to start kicking in and benefiting you without and until you've reached like a steady year of mailing them every month. So you better have a budget that can handle that. If you want to mail to 500 or 1,000 homes every month for a year, do that math. If a postcard ends up costing like 93 cents a piece, it gets up there, right? So yeah, the Postal Service would love for you to do that. Door knocking and email. There's a condition about the email. If you can round up an email list, you are allowed to email people who are on the do not call list. Again, it's to the do not call list. You can do these other things. But anytime you send an email to people, what do you have to have in that email? Are you all like me? When you're at the checkout counter somewhere, they say, you want to subscribe to our email list for an extra 5% off? And you do. But then end of the year comes around and you're like, all these newsletters keep coming and I never read them. What's at the bottom of each one of those emails? Scroll all the way down, look in the fine print, hard to even see it, but it's better be there. And if you do an email, send out email to people, you better provide the same thing.
Equal opportunity rights?
No, that's a great guess. But along the vein of not imposing upon people, when you get an email that you didn't ask for, how do you get out of it? Yeah, Iridio.
Oh, put the where you can cancel an email from coming.
You got it. Iridian Robin, they call it an unsubscribe link. So yeah, opt out, unsubscribe, some version of, if you got this and you didn't want it, or you no longer want it, an easy way for you to not have to get it again. Click the link, and sometimes it's annoying. They'll make you click again to find another place to where you can have to click to unsubscribe, and then they'll send you one more email, and you're like, ugh, I don't want this. But it says, sorry to see you go, and you're like, well, now I definitely am not coming back because you just emailed me again, which is exactly what I just said don't do anymore. So all of these are okay, even if you're on the do not call registry, because it's a do not call list. It's not a do not knock list. Do not email, do not snail mail. Okay, let's talk about this idea of compensating brokers that don't work in North Carolina. Out-of-state brokers. Here's the situation. A Virginia agent or Alaska or Arizona, wherever that's not North Carolina. I like to present this situation. Their grandma wants to come here to retire. She's going to move to Charlotte from Virginia. Her grandson is an actively licensed broker in Virginia. He finds you through your website, through your ads, maybe through your YouTube channel. It could be anywhere. He does his research and realizes, wow, this agent's really sharp down there in Charlotte. Let me put him in touch with my grandma because I think they'll take great care of her. And so this agent calls you and they say, hey, got my grandma. She's coming down there. Would you take her on as a client and pay me a referral fee? That agent wants you to pay them a fee in order to get grandma's info and take her on as a client. Beautiful, beautiful system. We will do referrals all day long, upside down and backwards. Happy to do it. if you can get us to a point where other agents are knowing and seeing you as the go-to agent in your market and they send you referrals, even if you have to pay them 20, 25, 30% of your commission check, take it, run with it, because that's a steady stream maybe, or at least several transactions a year. It takes a little while to get to that point, but I've received referrals. I've also sent referrals. If I had somebody, a friend, move into Florida, I could do some research, find a good couple of Florida agents, call them first, say, hey, got somebody moving your way. I see what you're doing out down there, and it looks like you're a top-notch agent. I'd like for you to take this client of mine and take good care of them. Would you pay me a referral fee? And I tend to, for my own self, I can say my standard or my normal is I tend to charge or ask for 25%. 25% of what? Not the sale price. I wish. 25% of the commission that they make is what I'm asking for. A quarter of it. And a lot of times they'll ask the same thing. That has sort of been what I've seen over the years. Now that referral fee, sometimes it's not just agent to agent. Sometimes it's like a company. Like Microsoft moves here. They have a whole bunch of people moving here too. I'm making this up. And so they find you and you're on the list because you're have such notoriety. And they say, could we refer our people to you? Could our HR department say, go to this agent? And they'd probably have several agents for them to pick from. But we're going to charge you 30% referral fee or 40% or 50% referral fee. True story. Some of these corporations, they charge you a little more of a referral fee. Why? Because they're going to use that fee to turn around and give most, if not all of it, back to that person that they're sending you as the compensation moving package that they offer them. A lot of that moving package these companies are giving their employees is not out of their own generosity. It's money they get from us for giving us the referral to help them to begin with, basically. And that's fine, that works, but I tend to shy, personal choice, I tend to shy away from the 35, 40, 50% referral fees. I'd rather not be, they call it the golden handcuffs. You get used to those, and now you're just working for 50% all the time. And if you have a 50% split with your firm and then pay a 50% referral fee, we're running out of money, right? So unless there's a steady stream, you better have a real good reason to pay that much generous of a split for that sort of thing. So that's what all that referral fees stuff is about. We've got a Virginia agent who wants to send grandma to your town. And he says, did my research. You seem great. Would you take care of my grandma, help her find a townhouse, and pay me a referral fee? And you'll say, sure. How much? And if you're happy with that fee, great. But here's what else you have to tell them. The next thing they say to you is, okay, we'll be down there on Saturday. I'm going to drive her down. She's my grandma. And you say, sorry, wait a minute. You're coming too? The licensed agent who wants me to send a referral fee? I'm sorry, but you've got to stay home. You can't come with grandma to look at the houses. You can't ride in the car. You can't even drive your own car and drive her and meet me there. You can't be a part of this process because the real estate commission won't allow it, because the real estate commission knows that we can't help ourselves. We brokers, we licensees, we can't keep our mouth shut. You know as well as I do. They're going to get back to their hotel, and if the grandson has not already been practicing real estate without a North Carolina license in the state of North Carolina, they're going to start over dinner and at nighttime and in the morning, the whole trip, they're going to be giving grandma advice. The problem with that is grandma's buying in North Carolina, so the advice that she's getting is not allowed. So we have to tell them, yes, I'll be glad to pay your referral fee, but you can't be a part of the brokerage activities here. You can't come to look at houses, and you can't give her advice. What if you let grandma out of your car, you showed her stuff all day, he stayed back, but she gets out, she goes in her hotel room, you go home, and she calls him and FaceTimes him and says, let me tell you about my day. Let me show you the pictures. What do you think about this house? Is he doing exactly what we just said he's not allowed to do? Yes. Do we have any control over that or even have a way to know this? No. But whatever you do know, you have to let him know. Don't do it. Not allowed. Here's the other part of this. What if you tell him this and he says, well, you're crazy. That's my grandma. You better believe I'm driving her down there. I don't even really know you. You just look good online. You would say, well, I've got a solution for you. Bring her on. You come too. You can ride in my car. I'll drive you around. You can give her all the real estate advice you want to, you Virginia agent, you. But I can't pay you the referral fee. See how that works? It's not that they can't come here. It's that they can't come here and engage in brokerage services and you pay them, because the top of the slide, compensating out-of-state brokers. And so think about the different ways the test question could be worded. Are you allowed to pay an out-of-state broker? Yes. Sorry, no. Let me reword it. Are you allowed to work with an out-of-state broker? Can they come here and you drive them around? Yes, but you can't pay them. You can't pay them compensation because they came here to engage in brokerage activity. Here's another piece of that puzzle. If the reason they want to get the referral fee from you is to turn around and give it to their grandma or their friend or whoever they're doing because they love them, then we could accomplish that ultimate goal without violating this either. Instead of paying them a referral fee, they can come on down, they can walk around and drive around, and we can be a part of it, and they can be a part of it. And we don't pay a referral fee to them. We just discount our commission straight to grandma. Because this is only about compensating out-of-state brokers from a referral fee. This has nothing to do with compensating grandma. And brokers can give their principal clients any money they want to. You could give grandma the entire buyer agency commission if you wanted to, as long as your BIC was okay with that. Your BIC is probably not okay with that. So you can give away stuff. You can also buy washing machines for people and warranties if it's the clients involved, the principals to the transaction. So just watch out for this one. Again, can't compensate them if they come and down here and participate. You can give them a referral fee, compensate them if they stay home and don't give the advice, because the advice they give is non-applicable. We're in North Carolina. They're licensed in another state. Okay. Various provisions of the Sherman antitrust laws. Sherman antitrust. Let's start here. Let me flip around a little bit. This is the big one. Very relevant. Has to do with the license, the lawsuit stuff. And if you've read the headlines lately or any time on this settlement stuff with NAR and all that, they get it wrong all the time. The headlines say things like, this is the end of the 6% standard commission, or some other nonsense. For one thing, there was never a 6% standard commission. People added the word standard. And yes, maybe a lot of people charge 6, but that has not been the requirement. It's always been negotiable. In fact, it's not only it is a requirement to not call it standard, right? We've got to say specifically, hey guys, there is no standard commission. Every commissions are negotiable. Now, that means we can't call it a standard commission across the industry. Could you say, hey, seller, when I was talking to the seller a couple hours ago, he said, what do you charge? And I could say my standard that I charge everybody is 14%, 7%, 6%, whatever. I can say that because it's what I choose to charge. It doesn't hurt him. If he doesn't like what I charge, he can choose not to hire me and go find somebody that charges what he wants to pay. So that works. No such thing as a standard. All commissions are negotiable. And don't forget, sometimes if they want to pay less than you want to accept, there's always the magical word called no. Just maybe you agree to disagree. Maybe this one isn't for you. Get out of there. If they're putting that much of a fight up against it, you may not want them as a client to begin with. If they're this difficult up front and don't see your value, that means probably you didn't explain your value well enough. It's probably our fault when they don't grasp it. Because most of those things are because we could have done better at explaining that sort of thing. So this is a big one about Sherman antitrust, but Sherman antitrust laws include more than just no standard commission can be declared. By the way, not only can you say my standard or what I charge is 6% or 5%, your firm can say the same thing. Your firm can tell you that here at this firm, we charge 6 every time, never deviate. If you want to try to negotiate and charge less than that as one of our agents, then you're going to have to take even more of a cut because we're going to get what amounts to 3% ourselves. What we would normally, or whatever our split normally is going to come off of what we demand. And you're going to have to take the extra hit. So that could be, maybe or maybe not. They might just say, whatever you sell, we'll take our 20% off the top of that, whatever the numbers are. So this is one element of the Sherman antitrust laws. What's another one? No monopolies allowed. In other words, you can't say something like this. Well, sorry, let's go back here. No monopolies allowed that limit competition. You can't just take over and not give the consumer choices. Another one is this, no price fixing. Industry can't set fees. Hey, everybody who subscribes to the MLS has to charge at least 4%. That's not allowed. Realtor Association, group of brokerage firms can't get together like the big top 5 firms in that market and say, we demand that all of us, we're going to choose that we all of us who represent 90% of all the agents in this market, we're going to always charge at least 5.5%. That's not allowed because, again, you're basically bullying the consumer, giving them no choice. Don't get me started on something like the phone company, right? How many choices do you have of a landline phone company? There's usually one, right, in a given area. Now with cell phones, it's sort of become a non-issue. But back in the day, you called the phone company, not a phone company, to get your phone connected because it was wired to the wall. Also, a group of individual brokers can't get together and say, we're going to all agree not to charge less than this. We're not going to have any low, super discount, low price brokers. We all want to maintain a standard here and not give the consumer any choices below this level. Not allowed. But so while it's not allowed among bigger groups like that, it's still allowed for a firm or for an individual. But groups of firms, no, they can't. And this one, boycotting, sometimes, even on Facebook, I hold it down pretty well in CE classes, but definitely on Facebook, sometimes those posts get out of control and people say things like, Zillow is terrible. Let's just agree not to use Zillow, not to show their listings. Wait a minute, guys. You just engaged in boycotting, attempted boycotting, because you're just proposed and tried to rally a group of people to get together and not do business with a certain single other broker. So to get together and not show a rival firm's listing, that's boycotting. That's not allowed under the Sherman antitrust laws. To not use a service provider like a home inspector, maybe the home inspector was very picky in your opinion and caused the buyer to be extra scared of the house and ask for a bunch of things to be fixed, and the seller thought that was ridiculous and didn't agree to fix those things, and so the transaction fell through. Real world situation. What if enough brokers run across this with this particular inspector and they feel like this inspector is what we call a deal killer? They're so picky with their report that they scare everybody away. Let's agree to not use them. Let's run them out of business. None of us are going to send them any business from here forward. Not allowed. Because you would have cheated the consumer out of another option. Can't create a monopoly. Can't engage in boycotting. And then this one, the last one under Sherman antitrust. This is Charlotte. And it's Charlotte divided into 4 sections: Northeast, Southeast, Northwest, Southwest. You couldn't have 4 real estate companies and each of them say, okay, I like the Northwest, So I'm going to work the area in blue. A is my area. You guys stay out of it, and I'll stay out of yours. So firm A sticks with area A, firm B sticks with area B, etc. Not allowed. You can't split up a market and not give the consumer multiple choices of other brokers and just dominate that one section because you as a group of firms have decided to try to do this. It probably would be an effective way to do business, but it's illegal. How do we earn a brokerage fee? Do you remember? We talked about that already. What is this idea of earning a brokerage fee? At what point have you earned it?
When you enter a contract?
Yeah. When you enter into a contract, that's definitely the start of it. And let me give you a word to start it with. When you have procured what? 3 words, 3 parts to this buyer that you found.
Ready, willing, and able buyer.
You got it. That's when you earned it. Do you get that money in that moment of earning it? No. We don't receive the money until closing, but we earned it weeks or days ahead of that time. We earned it whenever we found a ready, willing, and able buyer. The ready and willing is pretty easy to figure out in court. That's when a buyer came along, raised their hand, made an offer. The offer got accepted, ready and willing. The able is the part that kills most transactions because did everybody blow this deal up and did it all fall apart when the buyer got proof of the loan? All they had to do was show up to closing and sign. Well, then yes, now we have able, ready, willing, and able. Or was the buyer a cash buyer from the get-go? And the cash is sitting in an account, $2 million account, and it's got a proof of funds letter and a statement showing $2 million balance. Now they're ready, they're willing, and if they wanted to spend that cash today and buy it, they could. All they're waiting for is the home inspection process and the title search. But they could if they needed to. Therefore, now we have earned it. Now we have produced a ready, willing, and able buyer. More than cash buyers are mortgage buyers. So ready, willing, and able ends up being later in the process when the loan is conditionally approved. So compensation is in the listing agreement, by the way, not in the offer to purchase for now. With the settlement, that might change, but right now, testable to you, compensation is referenced in the listing agreement. The offer to purchase, actually, the current rules, which might become old rules, but I'm going to keep teaching it, it's not allowed for us in North Carolina to reference agent commissions in the offer to purchase. Not allowed to do it. We can't reference, we can't ask for, we can't negotiate our commissions in the offer to purchase in North Carolina. We also can't put in a limitation of our liability in the offer to purchase. Notice I keep saying in the offer to purchase. What document we're talking about really matters. So the limit of liability, that means, hey guys, offer to purchase time, I'm going to add this addendum and it says, hey, I'm the buyer agent. I might be terrible at this. You're not going to sue me over it. I just started. Just acknowledging that I'm terrible. Don't sue me, bro. That's silly, right? Dumb wording. But if something along those lines, not allowed. You can't have a limitation of liability to protect and cover yourself. I've seen some agents in the MLS write, square footage 6,350 to be verified by a buyer agent. This is the listing agent saying this. Not responsible for the accuracy of this statement, this number to be verified by someone else. That's not going to work. If that's in the contract, it won't help them. That listing agent is still responsible for reporting the proper and accurate square footage. So we earn it when we produce a ready, willing, and able buyer. When do we get it? When we have closing. What's closing again? What item has references and establishes the closing moment? What's happened so that we can now say we're closed?
Filed with the register of deeds.
Yes. Papers signed, that's settlement. Sent up to the lender to be verified, all the signatures happened, that's settlement. The money wired from the lender to the attorney so the attorney can pay out everybody, that's still settlement. But when the attorney either logs on to the Register of Deeds or goes in person and records the deed, now it's closed. Now we can get our check, but we still don't have our check yet. I do, because it's my own firm. But if I worked for another firm and I get that closing proceeds check from the attorney, my piece, it's not all mine. I've got to go back, turn my remaining paperwork to the firm, give them this check because it's made out to my firm, not to me. And then hopefully your BIC is cool and will hurry up and immediately turn your piece over and not make you wait a couple of days. But sometimes they make you wait. Some firms might have sort of a turnaround built-in procedure that makes you wait. I would hope that most don't. But you will eventually get a check with your name on it that you get to do with as you please. Save your taxes. Set the taxes aside, by the way. It's all gross, not including taxes. Nothing is taken out. No FICA, no nothing. So you got to get good at personal finance so you don't get in trouble in this business. A lot of agents get in trouble because of taxes that they didn't set aside. So we could have earned and be entitled to the commission even in cases where the transaction falls apart. If it falls apart because one spouse signs the paperwork but the other refuses, that's not our fault necessarily. We are still entitled to the commission. Do we want to pursue it in a court of law? Do we want to sue them over it? Maybe not. Probably not. But we could in some cases. So if the transaction falls through because the spouse won't sign, because there's a title problem, a cloudy title, defect in the title, any way you want to say it, we have still, if we produced a ready, willing, and able buyer, we're still entitled to that commission. Good luck collecting it. That might be a problem. So you'd have to sue them over it and go try to get it through court. If they can't deliver possession when they're promised to, when the seller promised to, you still might very well have earned and be entitled to your commission. If they pull some extra stuff out of the air or other places and say, yeah, I know I wanted to sell it for this and this and this, but I also now I want to take my L-shaped desk that I was going to leave, and it's in writing in the contract, but now I want to take it with me. Whatever the extra required terms over and above what was in the listing contract, you still delivered you've still earned and are entitled to the commission if they require more terms than what they promised up front. And if the parties decide to cancel because maybe buyer changes their mind, seller didn't really want to sell to begin with, they have second thoughts and they both decide to just part as friends and let's just end this thing, you still could say, yeah, but what about me? I did all the work and now you're throwing away my 40 hours of effort. So you better pay me. Yeah, but we didn't close. We were going to pay out of the proceeds. Not my problem. Pay me the commission. I earned it in good faith. I did the work. So you need to pay me. You might not use those words, but as a seller's agent, a listing agent, might be less inclined to sue them unless the buyer agent's firm comes after you for their part of the commission. And rather than pull your own money out of your own savings to pay them to make them happy, you probably don't want to do that. Take money from something that's not even related to this transaction. They sue you, so you, meaning your firm, so your firm sues that seller. Sort of would be the chain of events there. The buyer could breach the sales contract. Again, you still could be entitled to the commission. This thing called procuring cause of sale, we'll get into that when we come back. I'll see you back here in 10 minutes. Okay. Welcome back. Come on back. Join us. Make sure you're on camera and nice and visible for my records. And don't forget, by the way, I think I've already told you this before, but Zoom tracks your attendance by minutes. So after every class I see, and I have to write it up in the report, who was here for how long, how many minutes were missed. And after the end of the course, in order to be able to qualify to take the final, you can't have missed more, I think more than it's like 1,050 minutes. So it amounts to being several class sessions. So just be careful. Stay on top of that. And closer to that time, if you're curious where you stand, I will let you know. And if I see people in the red zone, I'll let you know as well. But don't get that close, because there won't be any leeway. I don't have any say over it. If you've missed stuff just because, but then at the end, you have to miss stuff because of a very good reason, it's not going to help, because you missed the stuff just because earlier, right? So it's a very strict number of minutes missed maximum that you have there. This concept of procuring cause of sale. Let me give you an example. Real world example. My first firm that I joined had multiple locations. There was a university location. There was a South Charlotte location, among others. I was maybe early 20s. I was helping a buddy of mine who was my same age find and buy his first house. So he was tuned in to that whole process. And one day, on Saturday, he just on his own went to a new construction townhouse community, and that was fine. He went there. He didn't tell me, and I wasn't supposed to help him or anything. He was just checking it out. And if he would have liked it, he would have told me, and I would have gone with him, and it would have been fine. While he was there, an attractive woman of our same age came in, and she was progressively more and more frustrated, angry. He started talking to her because she was pretty. And come to find out, she was angry because the agent she had been working with from 45 minutes away to the south drove her there to show her those houses and among some other townhouses, and he forgot his lockbox key. He couldn't get into any of the scheduled houses. Now, that's just a mistake. She was just annoyed. She wasn't firing offense level mad at him. But when you added that to the other parts that he had already done, like talked down to her, condescendingly to her repeatedly, she was over it. He worked for my same firm, but again, at the South location, not the one I was at. So I didn't know him. She was ready to fire him. He forgot the key. No, not a huge deal, but he was also all these other reasons she was already going to do it. And this just was whipped cream on top. And the other part of this was he had never explained the agency requirements and disclosures, never had the working with agents disclosure signed, never had a buyer agency agreement signed. That's okay, because you can be an oral buyer agent, but none of it, supposedly, according to her, was ever even addressed. Excuse me. So when she said to my friend what happened and expressed how frustrated she was with this guy, he said, well, you should call Neil. He won't forget his lockbox key. Thanks. Appreciate that, Eric. And she did. She called me. And so I asked her all the questions. Did you sign anything with him? Why are you doing this? What's up? You know, he works for my same firm, just a different location. I don't know him, different office. And she said, well, let me just tell you, it's only because of your friend that I'm even talking to you. I was just about to go to some other firm, any other firm than this one. So if you can't help me based on the referral and the suggestion, it will not be your firm that helps me. I'll go to your competitor. So I took all of that. I said to her, well, hang on, let me check with my manager, figure out how to navigate this thing, or if I can even help you at all. And my manager told me all the same questions, asked me all the same things. And she said, well, he didn't do any explanation. He didn't get anything signed. As far as I'm concerned, free game. You are free to pursue working with her if you wish. Just have her give him the news and tell him that he's basically fired. Since there was nothing in writing anyway, it was just sort of a formality. And she did. And they stopped working together, and I started helping her. And it wasn't like I just showed her one house that he had already showed her and she bought it. This turned into a whole month and a half. I drove her places. I met her at places. We looked at many places. We looked at 3 of the townhouses he did show her at some point. He had already shown her some, and we looked at those again as a second look. She still was interested in one of them, but I also showed her probably a dozen or more other things all across the city. I even showed her and her mother together. So I put in the work. As luck would have it, after looking all across the whole city, she decided to buy one of the few that he had shown her also, of course. One of those townhouses in the university he had shown her. I showed it to her a second time. She ended up deciding, compared to everything else, she liked it. And so we wrote the offer and we got it. She closed on it. I got paid. Great. 3 days later, my manager called me in the office and said, so-and-so from the South Park location says that he was working with her first and he is the procuring cause of sale and therefore he wants the commission that you just got. And I'm like, well, how much of it? And she said, all of it. He thinks he's entitled to all of it. And I said, well, I disagree because of all the reasons we just stated. And she remembered the conversation. She remembered telling me if she don't have anything signed, then fair game. So I just walked away. And she called me again the next day and said, okay, he's saying that he'll go down to 50%. He just wants half of it. And I said, let me think about it. No, still no. And went on with life. And the third time, the next day, she said, he wants to see if you'll agree to 40%. And I said, let me think about it. That's a no. And she said, Neil, you know, sometimes just to put things to rest and move forward, maybe it's good just to give up a little bit of money so that we can put this to rest. In other words, I'm tired of dealing with this. Shut up and give your money away so I don't have to deal with this anymore. And I was like, thanks for being my manager. It's not very managery of you. I didn't say that part out loud. He came back with 35%. I finally gave in because she pressured me like 3 times in a row. And I said, okay, I'll do 20. And he said 33. And I said 25. And he said 30. And then I said, you know what? I tried. I'm done. What's next? What's the next step if I refuse? And she said, well, if you refuse, he could appeal to the local realtor board and ask them to do some sort of arbitration where we both present our case and they make a decision. The problem with that is we would be, as that same firm, all in the same firm, sort of, in my manager's words, airing our dirty laundry, letting other people know that we have an issue in-house. And she said, with both of your permission, we'd like to make a proposal, we managers, brokers in charge. Would you both agree to just appear before our own little in-house arbitration committee of 3 managers that don't know either one of you? Because there were like 12 locations. So they found 3 managers. We both agreed. We showed up in person, glaring at each other across the table, each with our managers. And then the 3 managers appeared in front and we presented our case. And long story short, I won the whole thing. I didn't have to give a dime. Part of what I did is I got the client to write a letter saying, hey, by the way, if it weren't for Neil, I wasn't going to even stick with this company. And that helped a lot. And then I also did some math. I did a little math thing and I said, normally I would have made like $100 an hour for this transaction. And now you want me to go down to X dollars an hour. And I've already had to spend 12 hours in this whole thing, figuring out this case and getting all my records and not selling real estate. So you've already cost me this much money because of having to go through this. And it all just somehow worked. But what was he accusing me of? What was he not really accusing me of, but what was he claiming that he was? The procuring cause of sale. He was claiming that he originated a series of events that without a break in their continuity resulted in procuring a ready, willing, and able buyer. Let's see which part of this failed for him. Did he originate a series of events? Yeah. He showed her some stuff. He helped her. Was there a break in the continuity? Yeah, that moment at which she was going to fire him and not even use our company if it weren't for me. So he was wrong. He had bad advice. This was not procuring cause of sale, but that's what it would be. What if he had originated the series of events without a break, resulting in a ready, willing, and able buyer? And let's say he's on the listing side, and through no fault of his own, the seller fires him and then goes around and maybe hires their cousin who has a license who does it for less. I'm just trying to mold it into that situation. Then he's the procuring cause of sale. So that's what we mean by procuring cause of sale. It's just these 3 bullets. Origination of a series of events, no break, and it produced a ready, willing, and able buyer. The one who caused all of this is the winner. The one who is entitled to the commission, who is indeed the procuring cause of sale. Here's another thing that we're teaching in the update right now too. What's the first thing you do if you let your license lapse? There's 2 parts to keeping that license. What are those 2 words for keeping the license ready and giving you the ability to sell real estate and make money at it? What are the 2 words I'm looking for?
Active and current.
Yeah, you got it. Your license has to be both active, meaning CE, and maybe post-licensing if you're a provisional, and also current, meaning the money. The renewal fee of $45 a year. If you're not current, you're expired. If you're not active, you're inactive. So if either of those happen, you become inactive or you become expired. If you don't pay the $45 renewal, by what date? What's that magical date due for $45?
June 15th.
Got a June 15th. What was the other one?
I said the 1st.
June 1st. The dates, or the one date for the money. Yeah, Robin says June 10th, and that's why we're talking about this, because it's so easy to get confused. And people in the update course do it wrong all the time too. The $45 renewal fee, which keeps you current, is due June 30th. When's the license year begin? The real estate licensing year of North Carolina starts what date? It's not January. Good guess. Not June 10th. Let me make a little side note here. The license year begins July 1st. Start of the real estate license year every year is July 1st. What does that mean? If you don't pay your dues by June 30th, then on July 1st, your license will expire. And that's not all. So you got to keep it current by paying the $45 every year by June 30th. And just like any bill, you can pay it all the way up to the night before the new thing, the new cycle. The other thing is the education. And the education is keeping your license active versus inactive. And the education is what? Is due when? When is this CE education due? CE, 8 hours, which is 4 and 4, an update plus an elective, due by what date in June? Some of you already said it. This one is June 10th. The education is June 10th. The money is June 30th, right? So if you end up forgetting about the education on June 10th, you should have finished by midnight your 4 hours of update course. It's one course, gives you 4 hours, and 4 hours of elective credit of your choice for a total of 8. Let's say you take your update course with me, and then you buy the self-directed elective that you're just going to watch in your free time, but you never get around to it. And on June 11th at midnight, you're like, oh, bleep, insert curse word of your choice. I forgot it. What's going to happen to your license as of June 11th? Nothing. You are still active. But on July 1st, you will absolutely go inactive. There's nothing you can do about it. Too late, because it's already June 11th. Because here's the other piece to this thing. From June 11th through 30th, the Real Estate Commission says we need a break. This is a blackout period. No courses allowed to be given. Can you imagine the upcharge a school could offer a course between the 11th and the 30th? They could triple the price of a CE course. Not that they should. But June 11th through 30th, you're still good. But on July 1st, you will be inactive. There's no way around it. So if you end up expired and or inactive, either or both, then the first stop, July 1st, when you go expired or inactive, don't do any more real estate. The test question might be worded such that it says an answer choice like, what you need to do when your license goes inactive or expired, contact the Real Estate Commission to find out what to do to fix it, or take a makeup set of elective hours in the current blah, 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 and pay $90 to renew instead of $45. True story. If you go expired, you got to pay this year's and the one you missed at the same time, $90 instead of $45. They're not going to give you the trust to pay it by the following June 30th. You failed the test, and now you got to pay them both. But none of that's the right answer, because the first thing you need to do if you go inactive or expired is stop doing real estate. What does that mean? This is why they make this such a big deal out of this. This is why I have to spend this time on this point. Some people get into this situation and they think things like this. It's July 1st. I just went inactive. I forgot my CE by June 10th. But I have a closing tomorrow. Surely I can show up to that closing. What's the big deal? Can they show up to that closing tomorrow if they're inactive? If that's the only thing left in the transaction? Who thinks it?
I'm going to say yes. This might be a trick question.
It is always a trick question. But again, I think it does trigger better. You cannot. That is license required activity. So you can't show up to that closing. What happens if you can't be there? Well, you're going to have to send somebody else. Your BIC will be the first attempt, right? Hey, broker in charge, bad news. Forgot to do that CE. I went inactive. Well, they're going to actually know this before probably this point, but you will have already in real life made plans for this because you knew it was coming, because June 10th was the deadline, and now June 11th, you're like, oh, nah, we can't. Hopefully, first try would be June 11th, and you realize you've messed up. First try is, can we possibly bump the closing up to accommodate my schedule that I've screwed up into? And if that's a hard no, then talk to your BIC who already knows you are behind and say, look, the closing is July 2nd. I'm going to be inactive as of the 1st. Could you go to the closing for me? You can't do any real estate activity. Nothing. Can you even call the client to say, hey, I'm embarrassed, bad news, I can't be there at closing tomorrow? You can't even call them. You cannot talk to the client. You can't call them. You can't go to the closing. What about a referral fee? What if somebody calls you and says, can you refer a good agent in Alaska? I'll just need a name and number from you. And all you would have to do is a Google search of some agents that maybe have some production up there and pass along a name and number. Do you think you can do that after all this big a deal that I made out of this thing this last 2 minutes?
I think you can, as long as you don't require a referral fee.
Well, that's just a given. I think the test is going to imply and make it work, maybe even just word it so that, yeah, there is a referral fee. And so with that said, there is a referral fee. You're doing real estate for money for someone else, then revised answer.
No, you can't, because it's compensation involved.
So part of the whole test taking dynamic is thinking, what are they trying to accomplish with this question? Try to think, why are they asking me this? And that might help you figure out the answer, right? Help you weed out some answer choices. They're not asking you this because of some elaborate reason. It's just one of the same basic things that you will have studied all of by that time that you see in the syllabus. Things that I've mentioned as testable. Well, oh yeah, okay, this is about inactive or expired. Then maybe this is going to be a test question about, can we get paid? And the answer is probably no, because they want to hit just make sure they beam that into our brains really good. So first stop, cease all brokerage activity. You have to be both active and current. So with that said, there's another little piece to this. You can't go to the closing if you're expired or inactive. But once your BIC goes to the closing for you, gets the check from the attorney, comes back, turns it in, and your check is cut, can you receive the check? Can you receive your part once you're expired or inactive? The answer is yes, possibly. As long as there was really nothing much left to do, as long as you already earned the commission, produced ready, willing, and able buyer, while you did have an active and current license, then you could get paid even though your license is not any longer active or expired or current. Either or both, right? So again, goes back to that earned thing versus make. You could receive it and cash it and spend it because as long as your license was active and current when you earned it. So look out for questions that are along those lines. In order to represent others for a fee, what do you need? An active license, meaning you did your education, 8 hours of CE, CE by June 10th, 8 hours, or post-licensing class for those of you who would be a provisional broker in this moment. Post-licensing done by 18 months from getting that license. If you're 18 months and 1 second without taking all 3 post classes, your license goes inactive. And there was a case one time of another instructor I knew. He told a story. He said, I covered this in class and I saw one of the students' faces change visibly. It's like this sudden horrifying dawn of realization. And he came up to him at the break and he said, I'm provisional, because he was in a post-licensing class. But I just realized from what you said that I probably should have taken all my post classes by now. I think I'm actually over my date. I thought I was just in time. And the bad news is I think my 18th month was last week, and I have a closing for tomorrow on $1 million property. Do you think he was sweating? He wanted that $20,000 commission check. And so my friend in the business, the instructor, said, you need to stop everything. Don't come back to class from the break. If you can't figure this answer out, you need to go out in the hall, call your BIC, and figure it out and work through it ASAP. Because it may be pointless for you to even come back today because you're already inactive, right? He was just trying to impress upon him the importance of not going to that closing tomorrow, because if indeed you need to verify what is your status, maybe you didn't realize it, but did you go inactive in this last couple of weeks? So that's why it's so important. That's how it could get you. Current status is about paying the money. Active status is about doing the education. If you don't do the education, you become this guy, an inactive broker. He's very inactive, just sitting there on the couch. He didn't do his education on time. And if you don't pay your money, just think of a parking meter. I don't know if any of you have ever seen an old school one like this, but the modern ones are digital. But in either case, if your money runs out while you're still out there at the, the whatever parade or a party on the cul-de-sac downtown, and you're just hanging out and you go too long and your quarters run out, your meter expires. If your money runs out, you have an expiration. Let's talk about listing practices. When we work with sellers, how do we handle it? How do we work with sellers? For one thing, the Real Estate Commission suggests that there are some pre-listing activities we need to engage in. Let me set the scene again, make sure everybody's on the same page. We're talking about going to a person's house, talking to that seller, and trying to convince them to hire and trust you to help them get their house sold. So, what do you need to go on this appointment? You should, all testable by the way, you need to get a copy of the seller's deed. Where can you find a copy of the seller's deed? I'll give you two choices. Tell me which one. Or both. Could be either or both. You could get it from the seller, or you could get it without the seller on your own somewhere out there in the world. Which one is a possibility? Either A or B.
Register of Deeds.
Say again?
I'd say both.
Got one both, and I think I heard the other one said Register of Deeds, and you're both right, because either one is doable. So in real life, the seller may actually, more likely, probably doesn't have immediate availability of the deed. They don't maybe have enough organization for that, but you have access because it's public record. You can look up the deed. Just go to the county website for Register of Deeds, ROD of the county, like the county you're talking about, and the acronym or the initials ROD for Register of Deeds, and you'll probably see at the top too. Or you could go there in person, and you can look this thing up right now if you wanted to. If there's a survey, that's something that's not public record. It's probably not recorded. The actual survey of the house, the plat map is quite likely, but the survey for this one property, probably not recorded. And so you're going to need to get that from the seller. That's why it says if available. Another thing that either you might be able to find or the seller, and I would rather the seller give it to me because they might have a more current version, but any rules to the neighborhood. Protective covenants, restrictive covenants, and covenants and restrictions, basically. The neighborhood rules, if there are any. Just a copy of those. Why? So you can read them, memorize them? No. So you can hand them off. Give them over to the buyer agent to give to the buyer. You might even take it a step further and add them in the MLS to this data sheet, to the listing when you put it in, as an attachment. So they don't even have to bother you asking for it. It's right there ready for them to have. You also need to verify the HOA dues, Homeowner Association dues and assessments. Guess what? The Homeowners Association is run by, you'll never guess, humans. And humans do dumb things, especially with money, especially if it's not their own money. And some HOAs are run by just the neighbors. Some of them are run by an official company like Hawthorne or Cedar Management. Those are some big time popular HOA management companies. But it could be that your neighborhood doesn't want to pay them the fee they charge to run this thing. And your neighbors are just 16 people of different ages with nothing better to do. And they're happy when you don't bring your garbage in on time to send you the letter saying, hey, if you do it again, we're going to fine you. Or some neighborhoods have rules that if you put your house up for sale, you have to use a very specific aesthetically designed matching yard sign. So you might have just bought $1,000 worth of signs or a couple $100 worth of signs, but can't use any of them because you got a listing in one of those neighborhoods that requires it to be green and white instead of your normal colors because it matches the aesthetic. So those are all HOA related things. But verifying what the dues are, it might be that the people running the HOA, those neighbors of yours, aren't being too good at it. and they're not they're trying to cheap out, and they're trying to collect the bare bones smallest amount they can, but it's not enough to set aside money like a townhouse community would have to do to put new roofs on all the buildings in 10 years. And so if they charge the lowest of the low they could get away with to keep everybody happy for 10, 12 years, and then all of a sudden everybody needs a roof, there's no money. In other words, HOAs can run this poorly. And if you're a buyer agent, you have a duty to discover and disclose if an HOA is not being run properly, so your buyer doesn't end up in a neighborhood that has a bunch of mess. So verify the dues, verify any assessments the HOA might have put on everybody in there. In the case of the roof situation, if they want to have everybody pay for new roofs for all the townhouse buildings, true story, it was an additional $250 a month on top of $250 of the existing HOA fees for the townhouse section, which was inside of a single family neighborhood, which also had an HOA fee. So they had maybe $500 a year plus $250 a month for HOA for the townhouses, plus another $250 for the roof assessment. You need to tell your buyer any of this stuff that exists. So look into all this up front, or find out from the seller most of this stuff. The deed you can get on your own. Now, you go there. You stand in front of that seller. You sit down probably at the table, and you're talking about the process. There are some things they need you for to get started. They're going to lean on you to give them the speech and the disclosure about working with real estate agents. What could we call that? Oh, I know. Let's call it the working with agents disclosure, right? Pretty good name. So you need to talk and provide that to them. We went over it last week, and 2 disclosures, 2 kinds of property disclosures. One of them is called the Mineral Oil and Gas Rights Disclosure, the MOG. As I pull it up, the MOG disclosure basically says, remember those subsurface rights we talked about a couple weeks in? The MOG disclosure says, hey, seller, have you sold those off or leased them to someone else? Because the new buyer has a right to know if they have to let someone else come in and mine for mineral oil or gas. Let me pull this other one up. There we go. The other one is that Residential Property and Owners Association addendum called the RPODs. Let's look at them. Here's the Mineral Oil and Gas Rights Disclosure. And what do we have here? It's only 1 page, by the way. Top of the page, it explains what this thing is. It's according to General Statute 47E. A disclosure is required for the transfers identified in this general statute, including first sale of a dwelling never inhabited. So this has to be provided even to new construction. The other thing that we're going to look at, the RPODs, does not apply to new construction. It says it right here. You don't have to provide it with the first sale of a dwelling never inhabited. So new construction, this is not permitted or not required, but this one still is, because even with dirt, you could have sold the rights to someone else to mine and dig down there for mineral and oil or gas. So then halfway down, it says these rights could be severed from the property separately. We knew that already. Somebody could buy the surface rights and sell or lease the subsurface rights to someone else. Here's the deal with the rights as it stands, basically, is what this says. If the mineral rights have been severed from the property by a previous owner, does the current owner know? Yes, they know, or no, they don't know, or whatever that previous owner did, you may have no idea. And they give you this choice to say, I don't know, no representation. I'm not saying yes or no, because how could I know? I didn't own it the whole time. The next one says the seller, the current seller, has severed mineral rights from the property, sold them or leased them somehow. And that has no option for no representation. It's either yes, they did, or no, they didn't. And then the seller intends to, they haven't already severed them, but they're intending to sever the mineral rights before the buyer closing happens. In which case, that's another hard yes or hard no. And then for whatever reason, the oil and gas rights are lumped together. Same thing though. Previous owner, yes, no, or I don't know. Seller has already done it, yes or no. Seller plans to, yes or no. And that's it. So this would apply to even just plain old dirt. Because with dirt, you have under the dirt. And that's where these things happen. It also says this important little caveat in this box. If the owner doesn't give you one of these, by the time you make your offer, by the way, disclosures for the most part need to be provided before the offer, or exercise an option to buy pursuant to a lease with an option, blah, 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 you could, under certain conditions, cancel the contract without any penalty. It wouldn't be a breach. It would be a right of the purchaser to get out of the contract because the seller has not provided this disclosure in the required time. I'll say that again. The buyer has the right to walk away if they don't get this thing within a certain amount of time from the contract formation. So, what does it say? If you haven't gotten this by the time of contract and you want out, you could be a buyer who says, look, I just now saw this thing 3 days ago or 2 days ago or 1 day ago. I don't like it. I don't even care that it doesn't say anything. I don't like that you took so long. You should have had it to me right away. If I want to cancel this thing, I either need to personally deliver or mail written notice to cancel it to either the owner or the agent of the owner. When? Here's the testable part, probably. Within 3 calendar days after you receive this disclosure, or 3 days after the date of the contract, whichever happens first. So basically the answer is 3 calendar days you have to get out of this thing just because you didn't get this when you first made the offer. It doesn't mean you have to have a reason. They could have checked no for all of these, and you have no reason to be concerned. It's all no, but you didn't get it within the right time. And so sort of that punishment to the other party for this is that if you want to, without any consequences, you can back out within 3 days of, again, either receiving this disclosure, which you received late after the offer, or following the date of the contract, whichever happened first. And they have a little extra note at the bottom. In no event does this disclosure act that we're explaining allow you to cancel a contract after you've closed on the sale. Once you've occupied it, it's considered acceptable and you can just keep it to yourself because they're not going to do anything about it. And that's it for the mineral oil and gas rights disclosure. It's about if you or previous owner have severed the rights. And then on the left here, people always get this wrong. I have to watch so carefully. Sellers are in this groove of signing everything on that listing day. And so they're signing this, they're signing the other disclosure, they're signing the listing agreement and all sorts of things. So they just pick this one up and they just start initialing there on the left. But it clearly says this is not for the seller to initial. This is for the buyer to say, yep, I saw this one. Oh, I saw number 2 and I saw number 3 and 4 and 5 and 6. Initial. And the, I don't know what this says about me, but the most annoying thing that I do in this business that I hate, I'm thankful for it being a listing or under contract, but it's so annoying to set up an electronic signing situation and have to drag and drop the initial block times 2 people down through these, and all 6 of these blanks. I'm like, can't we just do it once and it just hits them all? But no, currently the one I'm using does not. I know, first world problems. Stop whining. At least you have the license, Neil. We would love to just have the license. Okay, I won't vent to you anymore. That was nice. And that's it for that one. Here's the other one. We might have gone through this before, but I'll hit the highlights. For one thing, this does have an exclusion if it's new construction. You don't have to provide this for new construction. Why would you? It's new, right? What is there to say about it? It wasn't even in existence 6 months ago. There's some other exceptions or exemptions too under 47E2. But down here, same warning. If you don't get this to the buyer at time of offer, then the seller has a weakness. They have a loophole. They're giving a loophole to the buyer. Once you've delivered it to them late, they have 3 days following receiving this disclosure or the contract date to back out if they want to. Because they looked at this, you didn't have it to them in time, they can just walk. And there's nothing you can do about it as a seller. And there's some other stuff. It's got fine point print. We're revamping this thing. In fact, this update talks about it. CE class says they're going to make this double, 8 pages instead of 4, because it's ridiculously small. Let me see here. I am now, I don't know if you can tell if it translates. Let's see. That's roughly 100%, right? So depending on the screen you're on, if it's a laptop, desktop, it might be pretty close to a real 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. This is like 8-point font. It's ridiculous to old people that have eye trouble. And so they're going to enlarge it because they're going to make it 8 pages instead of these 4. But it's all mostly the same content. Year constructed, the type of siding, the kind of plumbing pipes. Is it on a septic or a sewer? All that fun stuff. Yes, it is. No, it's not. Or I'm not telling either way. And your client has the right to say no representation for the whole thing if they want to. With a caveat. You need to warn them before they fill this out. By the way, they have to, this is all testable. They have to fill it out themselves. You can't do it for them. Or they could get anybody else to do it. The only person in the world that can't fill this out is you. They could get their adult daughter to do it. They could get their 10-year-old son to do it. If, you know, he could probably do it fine too. But you can't. So we filled this, they have filled this thing out. You can help them. You can say, they say, what does this mean? What's galvanized? What's plastic pipes? You can explain those things and help them through it. But then they need to initial the bottom. And there's stuff about the HOA as well. Who's managing? Is there a management fee? Who's the president? So we can call them and find out what you owe them because you haven't paid your HOA dues, or you have and you need to get a credit from closing, blah, blah, blah. It's all kinds of things to know, and contact information so that the closing attorney can see who to reach out to for HOA fees when it comes to closing. And then what are your dues covering? Management fees, water, sewer, lights. Probably at the very least, most HOAs are charging you those HOA fees for management purposes, master insurance, maybe common area maintenance, maybe, but that's it. A lot of times water, sewer, street lights, trash removal are all handled elsewhere, either the city or some other contracted out firm. But it depends. Some neighborhoods have fiber optics included in their HOA. So that's the 2 main disclosures. And so that's for you to give to the seller. How else would they get them? So this top one, working with real estate agents disclosure, we talked a little bit about it. And if this is several documents stacked together, but if you explain the working with agents disclosure and they're just not understanding it, there's an additional document called the questions and answers on the working with agents disclosure. It's got these handy little diagrams that explain what dual agency is versus designated agency. Let me see. Speaking of that, since we've talked about it. Good. Yeah. Let me show you the actual one. This is it as a PDF. And it used to be the only one. There used to not be a letter size version. You just had to pull this try multiple fold brochure, and it wasn't called a questions and answers. It was the working with agents disclosure. And there was a flap back here. One of these panels was where they signed it, but it was troublesome because you rip out that little flap and it's glossy and it's slippery and it falls out of file folders. They realized finally, let's make this just a standard letter size paper. But this thing, now labeled the questions and answers of this, is something you're not required to give them, but you have available to you to give them. Because maybe they're having trouble understanding dual agency or any of the other crazy parts of the whole agency discussion. This is just an extra resource now. They didn't want to throw it away. They just renamed it, added some extra stuff. They talked about fair housing a little more, and then they added these. And so real quick, let me run through this because it's something we've already covered, and the diagrams might be useful. You could have, this is a classic example. Notice the ones red and blue are agents. They're not clients, they're the agents, the brokers. They're not holding hands. That's relevant. That means they're not working together. They're working against each other. You could imagine even a better diagram would be like a wall in between, or a fence, or a tennis net, or volleyball. So broker A is looking out for buyer, 100%. Broker B is looking out for the seller, 100%. Period. Not an in-house sale, not dual agency, just buyer agency and seller agency up against each other. The seller's trying to, and their agent is trying to help them get the most money for their property. And the buyer's trying, with their agent's help, to get the most house for the money, or another way to say it, the house at the lowest price and best terms for them. So this is a cross sale, two different companies. This one, oops, accidentally turned the page. There we go. Wonder if it'll keep doing that on me. This one is dual agency. One version of it. A very typical version of it where there's a single agent, although it doesn't have to be just one, but the one red agent is the broker's dual agent. And this broker is acting as a dual agent, which means, look at him holding hands of both parties. It's the agent in between them. It's the agent acting as a mediator. Which of the old car acronym is this person not able to provide either one of these parties?
Loyalty.
Yeah, loyalty. It's not obedience. They have to do what they are asked to do. And it's not, most prevalently, it's not confidentiality. They still keep the seller's secret from the buyer and the buyer's secrets from the seller. But they have to tell the seller, hey, seller, I know you met me first, and you might think that I owe you more because without your listing, I wouldn't have found this buyer because they called me off the sign maybe. And the seller says, yeah, exactly. So when I ask you that, well, how much more do you think the buyer will come up with their offer? I expect you to tell me a number. And you have to very politely say, I can't. Remember last week you gave me permission to be a dual agent for this transaction? I can't tell you the most the buyer would come up to. And then they go back to the buyer and they say, hey, I presented your offer. The seller said no, and they made a counter. The buyer says, okay, they're asking $500. I offered $450. They countered with $490. What's it going to take to make this work? Let's stop wasting time. Just tell me what they want. And I would have to say, what's the lowest they would take? And I'd have to say, all I can tell you is the current offer they wanted me to bring you. And so they're at $490 right now. Yeah, but if we could get to $475, do you think we could make this happen? I can't comment on that. Even if I knew it, I couldn't tell you because I'm a dual agent. Does that make sense? That's the level that the loyalty is off the table. We can't help one side more than the other. And this is the type of dual agency with one broker involved in between the parties. But you could have one like this, darn it. Oh boy. You could have a version of dual agency like this one. Same thing I just said. Imagine that single agent, just some weird X-Men science fiction movie thing happened and they just morphed into two separate beings. They are both not able to give more loyalty to one than the other. They both can't give away the secrets of one to the other client. They're basically like the same person. But these two brokers in this same firm are let's make it specifically true dual agents. if the buyer asks either of these brokers, hey, how much lower will the seller come down? Both of these brokers have to say, we can't tell you that. We're dual agents, remember? You gave us permission in writing to do this before we got to this point. And then if the seller says, hey, brokers, I hired you guys. I expect loyalty. How much is it going to take to get this buyer under contract? He's stuck at 450. I want 500. Can you get him up? Sorry, seller. Both brokers A and B, we can't give you that info. Even if we knew it, we can't tell you. We can't be more loyal to you than to the other one. Now watch this. Both of these brokers are dual agents. We know this because they're holding hands. They are working together. This is not an at odds situation. Broker B is not working for the seller while broker A for the buyer. They're working together in between both of them, compromising the loyalty, not able to show preferential treatment to either party over the other. And that's another version of this dual agency. It's just two people instead of one, but all the same rules apply. By the way, if this brochure were large enough, we could have another picture like this with 3 brokers in between, 3 red brokers, or 4 or 5 or 500 or 1,000. There could be a case with a whole bunch of brokers being true dual agents at the same time. All of them, no matter how many, are limited in loyalty, right? But then we get to this thing. Look what happened. They are not holding hands anymore because they explained to, let's just say, the buyer, hey, buyer, this thing called dual agency, if we know the seller would come down more, we can't tell you. The buyer flips out and says, that's stupid. I would never do that. I'm out of here. I'm going to go to your competitor, get my own buyer agent, and maybe make an offer on this listing. And they could say, wait a minute, don't go away. We have another option. We can restore loyalty within the house. Same firm still. Broker A and broker B work for the same company, but we can restore the loyalty component. Buyer, you can have your own broker all to yourself, broker A. Seller, you can have your own broker all to yourself, broker B. There's now a fence. If broker A finds out for some reason, somehow, that the seller is desperate, they are legally required to tell their buyer, just like if they found out because it's 2 separate firms as a co-brokerage situation. So I think does that help? Does that make a difference? I think the diagrams can be useful. But the main thing here is knowing the difference between true dual and designated dual. The wall is back up. What else is back up is break time. So go enjoy your last break. Then we'll sprint to the end. So I'll see you back here in 10.
And then he didn't marry her. But which is the way that it normally should go. So she stuck around. This one is So Long London. And I believe this one is about the dude she dated for like 6 years, right? Joe Alwyn is the name of the person she dated for like 6 years. And then he didn't marry her. But because, again, our modern society teaches women dumb things, she didn't at like year two go, hey, want to get married? And if not, then I'm off this train, which is the way that it normally should go. So she stuck around for 6 years, but she's really angry at him. There used to be an old phrase that has fallen out of use because it's considered politically incorrect. No one buys the cow if they can get the milk for free. And let's be real about this. That is the way that men tend to approach dating. That is the reality. In any case, if a man can get away with not marrying you for 6 years, and there's no pressure for him to marry you for 6 years, and he's not desperate to have kids and settle down, he ain't gonna marry you. Which is why, back to the Queen Bey, if you like it, then he should have put a ring on it. Correct. In any case, So Long London is another one of these kind of. It feels like she smoked a lot of pot before she recorded this. Here we go. So Long London. When this one started, I will say that it sounded like it was at a different tempo. I was like, oh, this will be interesting because it's like 160 BPM. When first, she's gonna sing it at half tempo, just to make sure you don't get too excited. Here we go. Boring.
Stop CPR after all, it's no use. The spirit was gone, we would never come to. And I'm pissed off you let me give you all that youth for free.
Okay, so again, we're back to 3-note choruses.
welcome back. Less than an hour to go. Hang in there. What, 50 minutes less than? So, we've looked at the questions and answers version. That's the brochure, but then the actual disclosures are either a single page for seller or a single page for buyer. And we went through that the other day too. But basically what this whole thing is about is merely just purely disclosure. All we're saying is, hey, look, we haven't agreed how to work together or whether we're going to work together yet. You and that prospective buyer or seller you're talking to, we don't know. And therefore, don't tell me stuff you wouldn't want the other party to know. And in the case of on a listing appointment, you're talking to that seller. Hey, seller, don't tell me any secrets yet. If that seller says to you, look, you're not the only one we're interviewing. We're also talking to 3 other agents. Okay, seller, well then all the more important, whether it's me or one of those other agents, don't tell any of us the lowest you would consider taking. Right? Be careful when we're talking to you about what we think we can sell your house for. Don't let it slip. Because if you tell me the lowest you would take, for instance, and then you end up hiring one of those other agents, I might bring the buyer for your house. You've listed with them, but I end up with the buyer. And now I know what you would take. I have to tell my buyer. So doing this sort of thing in real life, this is a great thing to do because I don't think a lot of agents think to do it. And you're also showing confidence and saying, look, take me or leave me. I don't care. I got plenty of other opportunities, even if you don't. You act like it and you say, look, here's how I work, and don't compromise. Don't just give in to every little whim. And if they're being a jerk, you don't have to work with them. Or if they're insisting that you price it at 500 and the comps that you're looking at only support 460, a lot of agents would be tempted just to get a $500,000 listing that's not really a $500,000 listing. They just want their sign in the yard. And a ton of agents would just do that. There's even a coach out there that coaches this online, says, yeah, take them. Take all the listings. They'll work their way down eventually. Well, there's a line, right? And we saw it in the first week. If you do too much of that to too much of an extreme, you could be guilty and in trouble with the real estate commission for willful misrepresentation. If you told them it's worth 500, but you know, based on your research, it's only worth 460, and you let them list it at that, or they let you list it at that, you've also put yourself ahead of them because you were just trying to get a listing. So it gets ugly. So the gist of this whole thing, all of these provisions in this one document is this: don't tell me anything you don't want other people to know, because this doesn't hire me yet. That's a testable thing. This is not a hiring document, purely disclosure. Disclosure, why? Because the real estate commission wants to see it in your files. Did we talk about how many years you have to keep your files? How many years do you have to keep the files of a transaction once it closes or once it terminates? Ends.
3?
Yeah, exactly.
3 years.
3 years, you got it. 3 years to keep all the files, and this has to be in there. So one of these needs to be in there for every file. And you also need to keep a separate file with just these in it, because we mentioned, I think a couple of weeks ago, just because you talk to somebody about this thing and show them this document and get them to sign off, verifying and proving that you explained it, doesn't mean that they will ever turn into closed business. You could maybe never hear from them again. You have to get this signed maybe the day you meet them to show 3 properties, but maybe they ghost you. You still have to keep this thing. The Real Estate Commission says, should you have more of these than you do total closed files? Yeah. Because odds are you've talked to more people about this early part of the process, money and motivation, than you have actually successfully closed. That's probably a smaller number than the ones you've just talked to. So watch out. Now, let's talk about the pre-listing meeting. It's a great idea, and the Real Estate Commission endorses this, when you have a listing appointment, to do it into 2 pieces. 2 parts. And this would be the part where you're going ahead of time The first visit. First, there's 2 visits. 1 visit, 2 visit. Now, you could do it in one. Maybe they love you so much based on the referral person that referred you. It's a mutual friend or a neighbor that you helped, and they're just raving fans. And so they were signing with you tonight, and there's nothing you can do about it, and you're happy. But if you have to work a little harder than that, the Real Estate Commission highly advises a 2-step appointment process. And so they're calling this first step the pre-listing meeting. You're not going to list it tonight. You're just going there to look at the property. That's what I did today. I got there today, and it's a guy I knew from a church I used to go to. And he said, come over, tell me what's up. And this was a couple days ago. No, it was yesterday. And I had no intention of trying to do a market analysis for today's meeting with him and spend an hour or 2 trying to figure out what his house would sell for. Why? Why do you think I didn't even try to do a full CMA for him on the first visit? What was I going to do? Pull the tax record, look at some things that have sold, look at some things that are currently active, but what I don't know is anything about his house yet. I had never been there. An appraiser doesn't give you the appraisal report until after they've gone there and then gone back to the office and done the work. So that's just silly, right? So I went there today. I said, okay, I'm just here to kind of get information so I can go back and actually do the work and figure out what I think your house will sell for. And he said, do you think it'll sell for this? And I said, I don't know. I need to go do the work first, right? And I was nice about it, but that's one of the things. Pre-listing meeting, talk with the seller about their goals. My favorite thing to do is to go in there with a blank pad of paper, not some fancy, elaborate flip book or iPad presentation or laptop. Just go in there and ask questions on this first visit especially. And I said to him today, I said, what's the most concerning or thing that you're worried about the most with this process? And he said, how much commission I'm going to have to pay. So he got right to the point, and that's okay. And we laughed, and I said, okay, fair enough. We'll talk about that. And then he said, he's also worried about coordinating things and he needs to do work and blah, blah, blah. So we also toured the property. We got up from the table after we talked about a couple things, and I walked through the whole house. It's like a 6,500 square foot house, it's a 3-level, 2 with the basement, and toured the property. And along the way, I looked inside a closet, just kind of glancing around, and right there on the ceiling, this closet had no light, but I could see some weird darker shape, and I pulled out my phone for the light, and there were 2 ceiling stains right there in the closet. And I'm like, what's up with that? Did you know about that? Is it active? Do we need to fix that? And so that's just part of the list. And so a couple other stains like that, a couple other issues, and I made sure to point out things that might impress him. I want him to know that I know what I'm doing, right? Because if I do have to compete with other people, another good reason for a 2-step appointment is to try to be the last one in, right? If you're the first one in, then you find out there's multiple interviews planned. Try to make sure you find out when those others are happening so you can be the last one because you have a better chance of winning. So we're looking for red flags of what? Of material facts. In the basement, I looked on the walls. I was smelling it to see if I could smell any sort of moisture, mold, mildew, basement smells, right? That was indicative of other problems. Found some wood rot around the bottom of some doors on the back side of the house. So all these are material facts, and I'm looking for these red flags. I'm also asking him basically, hey, what would you brag about to a buyer for your house? What did you like about it when you bought it? And it's on a big lot. It's like 1/3 of an acre. Now it has very mature trees. And they refinished the kitchen 4 years ago. Nice white quartz countertops, and made it updated, painted the cabinets. So I'm making a list of all these improvements. And then also, hey, what about the dining room chandelier? Are you keeping it? Are you taking it with you, or does it stay with the house? Does it convey that fixtures versus personal property issue, right? Making sure we know what their plans are so we can write. Once we get an offer, we want to make sure that if he wants to take the chandelier with him, that first of all, smart play would be to tell everybody, chandelier not included. The smartest play is to talk him into swapping it out and not ever showing it to anybody. Go ahead and put a cheaper one out in there so that it doesn't become a temptation. So hashing out all this stuff. And really, you're wanting to find out this information, but you're doing it for a selfish reason too. You're doing it to build rapport, to learn what he's into, what he or she was trying to accomplish, and hopefully figure out what you can promise them and promises that you keep that will cause them to want to hire you. So all these are the things that you're going to do during that first part. Another thing you'll do is talk about your plan for getting it sold. The marketing plan, fees, commission percentages, anything like that. He asked me that question and I gave him a number. I could have said, I don't know yet, but I already knew his deal. I will negotiate on commission if you're going to let me help you buy and sell. But he already planned to do the buying himself in Florida, had an agent set aside, picked out. And so I'm not getting any part of that. Although I did tell him, look, if that agent, he has not signed anything with them. I said, if you want a different second opinion, I can connect you with an agent and it will be somebody that would pay me a referral fee. And if they do that, if we work out that, I will share some of that with you in the form of maybe a reduced commission on this listing side. So it's when you can talk about all that sort of thing, and explain how the splits work. We talked about this already, but we'll hit it again because it's likely to be a question and it's such a relevant topic. There is no standard commission. It's always negotiable. Sherman Antitrust Act says this. Broker compensation, always negotiable. The industry can't set a commission. The real estate commission would never say, all of you brokers now have to offer 5% or less. Never going to happen. An individual firm, however, individual agent also could say, I don't work for anything less than this. So I could say I'm no less than 5% every time. Or my firm, my 20-person firm could say, we here at this firm, we don't work for less than 6%. That's allowed. But to say there is an industry standard is not okay. In the buyer agency agreement, and we'll take a look at it firsthand, but it basically is this, because this is an excerpt, but what the buyer agent is making is in that buyer agent agreement. It's also in the listing agreement. Let me show you what I mean. But first, let me go over a couple more words. A retainer fee versus a success fee. The retainer fee is not seen. I don't see it very often, but it's like an attorney charges you a retainer fee. Some attorneys say, look, don't even ask me a question for less than $200 or $500 an hour. You have to retain my services before I'll even answer your phone call. We could do something similar. We could say, to start working with me, give me $500 retainer fee. Good luck. As a new agent, as anybody other than a hotshot agent that's got a great track record, you're going to have trouble collecting a retainer fee probably because there's so much competition. But it's possible and it's legal. It's allowed. The most common one that we all know and love is the basically success fee. That's what we're making at closing. We've earned it already. Ready, willing, and able buyer. We're getting it at the closing. So that's called, another word for that is a success fee. Let's look at that buyer agent document. And it's this one. So we're cruising on down through this buyer agency agreement. Let's just examine the highlights. We've got that it's between the buyer client and the firm, not you, but the firm. You as an agent in the firm are going to sign for the firm, but it's the firm's name on this line, not yours. And then what type of property In this document, it lets you check some boxes. Maybe you just want to make it general. Maybe you write the word all in here and it's for residential only. Or maybe you say this specific neighborhood only because they only want to live in a place. I try to make it as broad, generic as I can because I want to get paid no matter what they buy, but it depends on the client. A lot of times these blue boxes or bold print have some suggested actions or suggested documents you need to cover. And so in bold, they say here, hey, the buyer has received a copy of that working with agents disclosure. That's a nice reminder because you need to have already talked about it before you're talking about this, because this is the hiring document. The working one is just the disclosure of how it works and what the options are. So now we're getting serious. We're talking about, hey, this is what hires me. How long do you want me? Term shall begin on this date and shall terminate as follows, either when they buy real property or fill in the blank date. And then if it's more than one property, this just runs to a certain date because you're going to be an investor and you're going to buy 10 things with me or however many we can in 6 months or however long the dates are. Look at this part though. This is what we're getting into. The compensation. It's on the bottom of the first page. The firm acknowledges receipt of a retainer fee if there is one, and there probably isn't in real life because, again, you have to be a pretty darn successful agent to get away with this in this market anyway. Not that you shouldn't. Talk to your BIC. Figure it out if you want to try it. The buyer agrees that the firm's fees shall be in the amount of what? Fill in the blank with what? A dollar amount. Could be a percentage of the purchase price or whatever you want to creatively come up with as a way to determine your fee. But here's the important part. The firm is going to try to get paid through the listing firm, your buyer agent firm that you're with, because this is a buyer agency agreement. We're going to try to get all of our money through the seller side, from the seller to their listing agent to us, and not bother you, buyer, at all for it. Because so many of them have already set aside some money for us. Hopefully it's enough. Now, with the new settlement, this might be a little less frequent. Now we're going to have to say, well, the same thing. It's no different. Because this next thing says, if the buyer purchases property where the compensation offered by the listing firm and seller is less than the fee, what fee? Your fee. The fee you choose to charge, you and your firm, right? If you're getting less than what you charge from the seller side, where no compensation is offered by either listing firm or seller, buyer and firm agree that the buyer will pay the difference between that fee and the one that you're getting. The fee you charge is, let's say, 3%, but the listing agent and seller are only paying you 2%. This says basically that the buyer, your buyer client, is going to give you that 1% difference. Still gets you to the total of 3, but 2's coming from the listing agent seller side and 1 is coming from your buyer. Good luck. You better be good at explaining this. A lot of buyers understand, but they're really hoping strongly that the seller is going to pay the entirety of it, right? So this is what's going to change a little bit. I think sometimes a little more frequently, maybe not 100%, but more frequently, the commission's going to be broken up a little more. What could also happen is that buyer agents just come to start accepting less and less and just taking it for what it is and not even trying to get it from their client, the difference. But it's always been here in our market, in our state, that if the seller's portion of contribution to the buyer agent is not enough, then we're going to expect it from the buyer. I don't think very many buyer agents and firms have pushed hard on this and really held that buyer to it, but they could have because it's right here. And frankly, shame on them if they didn't explain it the way I just did, because that means they kind of they're hiding behind the reality of it. And so if a buyer were to read this trying to fall asleep at night and discover this and their agent hasn't specifically addressed it, they might be concerned and wonder, what is that agent trying to hide? Why didn't they tell me about this verbally instead of just making me stumble across it? So it really goes back to disclosure and properly and timely disclosing Oh, look, firm will timely inform the buyer if the compensation offered is less than expected. It's in there that's how you're supposed to do it. But I guarantee most agents aren't doing it properly. If additional compensation like bonuses or rebates or other valuable consideration is offered through MLS or otherwise, sometimes builders and new construction, they'll say, hey, all you agents, if you can get a closing of one of our inventory properties by, I saw it today, by May 30th, then we'll give you a $500 bonus. So you have to acknowledge any bonuses before the offer is made. And so this is just a reminder of that. Firm shall timely disclose the promise or expectation of any additional compensation and disclose in writing before the buyer makes or accepts an offer to buy. I would say as a homework item that I'm not going to check, but it's for your own good, these types of things that I'm highlighting like this, that we talk about in this subject, go through while it's still fresh, either tonight or this weekend, and just circle or highlight the key elements. Not the whole thing. You're going to deep dive in this thing in Post-Licensing 301. But for your purposes, we've talked about how compensation needs to be addressed. Bonuses need to be disclosed if they exist before the offer. And so it's right there in writing. Compensation shall be deemed earned if any of the following happen. During the term of this agreement, the buyer indirectly or directly enters into an agreement to purchase blah, 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 regardless of the manner in which the buyer was introduced to the property. In other words, I'm your buyer agent. Even if you stumble across the property you want to buy by yourself, this agreement between us says I'm still due the commission, even if I wasn't the actual one who found it for you. Because guess what? You guys almost have as good of a resource of finding property as I do. The MLS is still the king by far, but you're not far from it because most of the things online like Zillow, Realtor, Homes.com, Trulia, they all have an agreement with our MLSs that let them pull pertinent data from it and post it on their websites. It's called the IDX. You don't need to know that. Internet Data Exchange. This is another point here that this is what we call a protection clause. If within fill in the blank days, I like to make it as many as possible just for the heck of it. But it's negotiable after this thing expires. So this has an expiration date. It's as it's required to. And let's say it goes ahead and expires. If the buyer ends up buying something that you introduced them to while this was still applicable, unless that buyer has hired another replacement buyer agent other than you with a different firm, then you are still due the commission. So it's designed to keep them from firing you just to go around paying your commission. Maybe they work out a deal with the seller or the builder and say, if I don't have an agent, you're telling me that I can pay 3% less on the price? Oh, let me just get rid of this agent then. Well, this is in the way. Now, let's not get into the weeds of, how are you going to find it? How are you going to find out? How are you going to prove it? You just need to know the laws and the rules. So don't worry about the day-to-day reality of what happens in the wild to make such a thing happen. That will just waste a lot of time that you could be spent studying. What else? We're hitting the highlights here. Firm's duties. What are the firm's duties? Performing the terms of this agreement. Okay, smart. Seeking the property at the best price and terms for the buyer, trying to help you get the most house for the money. Presenting in a timely manner all offers or counter offers to and from the buyer. That's a requirement, and it's listed here. The commission requires it too. We've got to present all offers immediately or not later than 3 days, according to the commission. Disclosing to the buyer any material facts that you know about. And we've talked about that already too. We have a duty to discover and disclose material facts, and it's just that. That's just it's just here in writing. And then take care of your money. If we receive money from you, Mr. Buyer, to handle this transaction, we've got to be careful with it and deliver it to the right places. Maybe it's an escrow account where it's going to sit if it's like earnest money. Maybe it's straight to the seller because that due diligence check is made out to the seller, and we need to get it to them as soon as possible or to their agent. Confidentiality, we know about that. Fair housing, buyer's duties. The buyer's going to work with you because this is an exclusive arrangement. They're not going to work with you and then work with somebody else. If they're signing this, they better be comfortable with just you, right? And tell you anything, you and your firm, anything about properties they might have an interest in, complying, being available to go look at things, conducting negotiations through the firm. Don't try to do your own separate negotiations, buyer. I'm your person for that. Run it through me. And let me accompany you on the showings. Don't go looking around at a bunch of stuff without me. Frankly, real world, there are a lot of builders who are cracking down because people will go in and look at the model and sit and talk to that agent and maybe even write up an offer. And then their so-called buyer agent comes along after the fact, after all the work is done, and swoops in and expects to have their name put in as getting the commission. And the builder reps hate that because did that buyer come there with an agent or not? Or did they know an agent friend who said, ooh, if you put me on the form, I can get a check. In other words, we need to do the work. Don't just try to get free checks and don't even show up to any step along the way. New construction, by the way, is more complicated and it should be handled as such. But a lot of agents let's just say there are agents who won't even show up until closing to get the check. And I, as a new construction rep, which I never have been, but if I were, that would suck. That'd be terrible. That's just not even cool. You need to work for your client. You need to be there for those meetings. Examining properties. Basically, we're saying, look, don't ghost us and involve us in all of this because you're hiring us and only us to help you with this. Conducting negotiations and communications, due diligence and consultation with the firm, paying for products that have to do with evaluation. Like it's on you, buyer, to pay for your inspection, your survey, your tests, your title reports, all that fun stuff. Dual agency is addressed in this same verbiage, word for word, looks exactly the same, formatting and everything shows up in the listing agreement just to keep it simple. So we won't belabor that point. We've talked about that. And here's where you say whether or not you allow it. Yes or no to dual and designated. And the compensation. If I'm going to be a dual agent for you, I'm probably okay with taking less than the full double-sided commission. So in other words, if I charge you 5% and I'm figuring another agent from another firm is going to bring the buyer and I'm cool with an even split, I'll pay that firm 2.5 and I'll keep 2.5. Total of 5. But my total is the 2.5. That's all I'm getting. That buyer agent is not giving me any of theirs. But if I'm the only agent in the form of a dual agent, now there's no second agent at all. Rather than charge 5, which I still could do, I'm okay, personally, business decision, with charging 4. 4 is better than 2.5. I am doing more work than I would be representing just one side, but now I'm representing both. So yeah, it's only fair that I get more than the single side of 2.5 in this case. But it's still, 4 is still less than the total they'd pay if there were 2 different companies, 2 different agents involved. So this is where you would put that. Talk about some ways to terminate this thing. We've already talked about those ourselves, and then some other stuff. By the way, just a little side note. You can keep the baby monitor up and watch them on the showing, but it's illegal to listen. Turn the audio off. I'm pretty sure some people are violating that. And there's also just a fair warning. Hey, buyer, here's what they're allowed to do, but they might very well be watching. One of those showings I had during that cold, which shall not be named, the COVID era, we went in, we were walking up the sidewalk, and I noticed there was a doorbell ring cam. And my clients weren't big maskers. They weren't too worried about it, at least with the 3 of us hanging out. And they said, do you think we should put the masks on? And there wasn't a special note in the showing instructions. Sometimes there was, but this one did not. And I just thought, you know what? I don't want to, if we're going to have to compete against other offers, quite likely, because it's just this is how that works a lot of times now. Let's not give them any reason to not like you. Let's just put the mask on just in case they're watching so that we don't hurt ourselves before we even have a shot. Because by the way, on that one, it was the only house they wanted to buy. They called me because it was the house next door to their best friend. And they said, this is weird. And this may not just fall apart and waste your time, Neil. But if we can't buy that one house, since it's beside our best friend, we don't want to sell our house. We don't want to buy any other house. And I thought, well, this definitely could be a waste of my time. But it wasn't. It worked out. But we had to fight. We were competing with about 6 multiple offers, and we had to go back and forth. And the listing agent actually liked me and knew me and thought, well, I've worked with you before, but I haven't worked with these other agents. I don't know if they're going to be a nightmare. So I'd rather work with you. And that went a long way. But we barely won it because thank goodness I advised that we offer just enough price and due diligence money. So this is just a warning about the surveillance. And then the big red box is like super important. And here's something that happened a few years ago. An agent, a top producing agent in South Charlotte, got an email that she didn't recognize. It had a link inside. And every one of you just thought, yeah, what do? You don't click the links in mysterious emails. She clicked the link. It was indeed a bad guy. It opened up her computer to whoever, wherever, and the fraud started happening. She had a closing coming up where the buyer needed to wire like $60,000 to the closing attorney. And the bad guys went through the email and saw all these emails, including the email from the attorney along the way. They crafted a fake fraudulent email from that attorney, so to speak, and reached out to the buyer and said, oh, we've changed our wiring instructions from when we told you last week. Here's the new number to wire the $60,000 to. And they did it. The buyers wired it. And as soon as they wired it, they immediately thought, oh, that was stupid. Maybe we should have called the agent, called the closing attorney and verified it. And so they did. And it checked out that, oops, you're right. No change to the wire instructions at all. Thank goodness for them, because there were plenty of victims who didn't catch it in time. They caught it in time that they were able to reverse the wire, because the bad guy, thankfully, was not there to pull the money out immediately. They got their money back. But I've also heard cases of wire fraud where the seller or the buyer lost $90,000 or way more than that. So this in the red is saying, hey, client, just know that I, as your agent, will never be the go-between talking about wire transfers. And before sending any wire, you need to confirm directly, without me in the middle, directly with the closing attorney's office, whatever you need to know to set that up, because there's this thing called wire fraud that could very well be happening. And they also take it to such an extent that they say you need to not only call the closing attorney's office or go there, but if you call them, don't just use a number that your agent gave you. Find the number yourself that is independently obtained. Make sure that it's a legit the person. I had one guy who works in the industry, and he just said, forget all that. I'm going to drive to the attorney's office and get this little chore handled right now. And he did it in person, because it's pretty hard to be fraudulent with a face-to-face meeting. Buyers should not rely on a phone number in an email from the closing attorney's office, the buyer's real estate agent, or anybody else. Can you tell this was a big deal? When this happened, that fraud situation, it was a major firm. It was the first firm I was with. I wasn't with them anymore. So by this time, they had even more than 12 offices. They were huge. And immediately, they implemented wire fraud protection procedures. She had her computer completely checked and verified and went into all the extra checks and double checks. Because frankly, if her client had actually lost that $60,000, next stop, sue everybody. Sue their agent, sue the firm, and just see where it all lands. So they got after it quickly, and then it turned into all of this stuff. This wasn't here back then. This came about because of things like that during that year or so. That's about it. That's pretty much the buyer agency agreement. Then we have the signature lines. So we'll do the same thing with the listing one, but let's see where we're at. Keep going. Buyer compensation, agent compensation is in the agreement. There's a retainer fee, which is optional, the success fee, which is more likely to happen. We've got this concept of a co-broker sale. How many companies are involved in co-brokerage? How many firms?
2 or more.
What'd you say?
2 or more.
You got it. Yeah, more than one, for sure. One for each at the very least. So we've got, I think some of my images went away, so it looks weird. But a sale price of $400,000, a 6% commission means a total dollars of $24,000. And so if it's an even split, which my missing images would have revealed, then the listing firm is going to keep 12 and the selling firm helping the buyer is going to keep 12. What we don't know from this is how much is the broker going to keep versus the firm on each side. But this is the idea of how fees are split when it's a co-brokerage situation. This one is an in-house sale, same money, but this time you've got a seller's broker being a designated dual agent maybe, and then you've got a buyer's broker helping just the buyer, all in the same firm. And so total dollars is $24,000. That's within the umbrella of the commission of the listing firm. And then that's going to be split depending on the split percentages of each individual broker. Seller's broker is going to have a split of whatever they have up against their firm, and the buyer's broker might have a different one. They might both start at 50%. That's what my first firm that I was at did. New agents had a 50% split. And if you sold $18,000 of commission or earned that much commission, then you bumped up a couple more percentage points. Now your split is 52 to you. A couple more thousand sold. Now it's 58. Now it's 60. And then with a cap or a ceiling of maybe like 75 or 80. That's just one of many ways you could have as a split plan with your firm. But some firms keep it simple and they say, forget any of that. You're going to start at 80 and finish at 80. You're just always going to get 80% of whatever you bring in. That was the last firm I was at. Now my firm says I get to keep all of it because it's me. But then you've got more creative solutions like no split, or in other words, 100%. You get to keep all of it. But in those cases, you will maybe have a desk fee or a transaction fee or both. A desk fee every month minimum. I was at Remax once upon a time, and I had a 95 split. I got to keep 95% of the commission. But my monthly desk fee was $1,100 because Remax gravitates and draws the heavy hitters. If you can get to that level, it's because you really are cranking it out. And so there's always a trade-off. Higher split probably means higher fees. And then we were approaching 2007 and 8. So it got to the point where I had a month of October with 3 or 4 closings on the books, none of which actually closed. And that's what got my attention in 2008 of October. I realized, wait a minute, what's happening? And that's when I also decided to leave that firm because I can't just commit to $1,100 a month if I don't have closings, right? For too many months in a row. So all of that can change, and that's where these splits can go, and that's how they can look. Different types of listing agreements. So there's one, I'm going to skip this and come back to it after I take away the answers, but let's look at the types and then we'll finish and come back around tomorrow. But the open listing agreement. If it's an open listing, first of all, we don't do that here. We don't do these in North Carolina. Thank goodness. I don't even think we do them in the whole country, but I think they do it in England because what an open listing contract says is that the seller can list with multiple firms. And so you'll have a listing with a front yard with 5 different signs in it like this. And whoever happens to bring the buyer gets the commission, and the rest of them are just losers. They get nothing. So the seller has the option to list with multiple firms. And only the one bringing the buyer gets paid, and And also with an open listing agreement, if the owner brings the buyer by themselves, maybe they work somewhere that's an hour away and there's no way for you, the broker, to ever run across the person, but they put a flyer up in the kitchen at their work and somebody responds to it. In that case, they found the buyer themselves. And with an open listing agreement, you don't get anything. They don't have to pay any commissions because they found the buyer themselves. So that's the basics of what an open listing agreement is. Then there's this one. The next two are potentially confusing. This one is called an exclusive agency listing, and this one is called an exclusive right to sell listing. So exclusive agency versus exclusive right to sell. What's the difference? And then I'll recap this thing and pull it together before we go. Exclusive agency says if the owner finds the buyer by themselves, he does not owe a commission to the listing agent because the owner found them by themselves. That's part of the deal here. But if the listing agent finds the buyer, the owner has to pay a commission. Or if another firm brings the buyer, then the owner has to pay a commission as planned. So there's just one out for the owner to not have to pay a commission, and that's bringing the buyer themselves. If they don't bring a buyer themselves, then the listing firm gets paid. Whether it's them who finds the buyer because they did an open house, for instance, an unrepresented buyer it could even be, or another firm in the MLS has a showing of the property and ends up resulting in a contract. So again, back to this open listing. Can the owner get out of paying the commission? Yes, if they bring the buyer themselves. In the exclusive agency, can the owner get out of paying the commission? Yes, if they bring the buyer by themselves. Back over here, could the owner possibly pay out a commission to a firm? Yes, any of these multiple firms that they have the right to hire. With this one, yes, but it's only one firm. It's only their listing firm they're going to pay, and that listing firm will share it if there's another co-brokerage sale kind of situation going. We don't like either one of these. We're not even allowed to do this one. Open listings, no, off the table. Exclusive agency, maybe. But quite commonly, most commonly, we see the exclusive right to sell listing agreement. That's the one that agents and brokers like the most. Because even if the owner, seller, brings their own buyer, finds them themselves, and you had nothing to do with finding it, you are still due the commission. Of course, if you bring the buyer, you do the commission. If it's a cross sale or an in-house sale, cooperating sale, you still get paid. And if the owner brings the buyer too, you still get paid. Why do we like this more, obviously, besides getting paid? Well, in real life, the reason that newer agents don't tend to be successful getting listings right off the bat, you need some money to market and promote and list and measure and take pictures and blah, blah, blah. It's probably harder to compete to get listings because you're up against agents that have more experience, and I'm not discouraging you from trying. I'm just saying it's sort of an advanced thing. Most agents just work with buyers first and then work their way toward listings, unless they just have maybe the buyer they're helping needs to sell something, and not unheard of that a new agent gets a listing. But the exclusive right to sell says we deserve to get paid because there's a lot of front-loaded expenses. When you list a property, again, you could have spent, let's say, $300, $400, $500 on professional photography, drone photography as well, aerial shots. You could have spent $200 or $300 on a professional to measure the house and provide a floor plan. You could have spent $300, $400, $500 on a videographer to walk through and make a home tour. You could do some of this or all of this yourself as well. So it's easy to spend a bunch more money with a listing than with the buyer. And so if you spend all that money in the first week to get it up and running and on the market, and you have this where the seller accidentally stumbles across somebody sitting on the curb who wants to buy it, is it fair to you who've just spent $1,000 or $2,000 to say, oops, I guess I'm not getting paid. Yeah, let's not run our business this way. Let's still get paid. Because here's the other part. Even if the seller finds the buyer themselves, and it's going to be an unrepresented buyer, for instance, we're not finished. That buyer still needs somebody to help them understand how to put the offer together. And that's you. So you're still doing things to earn the money. Finding the buyer is just the tiniest part of the piece of this whole puzzle. It's getting from contract to closing that really is where a grown person, a grown adult shows their stripes, right? You're a grown man, grown woman, and a professional. That's where your value is. Your value is not opening doors. That went away back when Zillow first started, when everything went out there to the whole internet. They didn't need us to find listings anymore. So letting them in the doors became less and less of a required skill. I even know of some firms that have listings and they just have this system where you could just text them and say, hey, I'm a potential buyer. Give me the code so I can look at this vacant property. They're all vacant. You can't show occupied houses, but they let the general public get codes and go look at it by themselves. I struggle with that because if we're just giving the general public with at least agents have been vetted. We've had to pass tests. We have to pay to renew. They know who we are. We had to prove a character and background thing. The general public gets the code to a vacant house. What's to say they didn't leave or they just stayed there and they're just waiting for the next person and they're maybe trying to wait for the next person to do something bad, to take their purse, take their wallet, or worse, hurt them. So yeah, we've earned it. Even if we didn't bring the buyer, there's still a lot left to do in that under contract phase. So this totally protects the listing firm. And even if the seller brings the buyer, you get paid. So the exclusive agency version means one firm, just like the exclusive right to sell version of the listing agreement. One firm is going to get paid if the firm brings the buyer. Then the other question with an exclusive agency one is that the seller could somehow manage to not have to pay a commission because if they bring the buyer, the seller can sell and not owe commission. That's exclusive agency versus exclusive right to sell. The firm is paid no matter who brings the buyer. When we come back tomorrow, we'll talk about the rest of this stuff. We've got good ways to get through this chapter. Go ahead if you haven't yet and take the quarter term exam for tomorrow and make notes of the questions you have. And I'll go through some of those questions and we'll kind of walk through them together. I'll take the newest version myself. I think he's been updating the exam, so I don't even use the old version anymore. So I'll make sure it's a nice new version like you took and answer your questions and show you how some of them could have been more easily answered. I think that's it. We're good. Have a great night. See you tomorrow.